Mr. Tiller. Bring the fishing pole here, please, sir. I'll let y'all get started.
A lot of my.
How you?
Hey, if everyone would. Hey guys, if you don't mind, we're about to start here. It's 9:01. Ask if you don't mind, please head to your seats. Members of the public, y'all are more than welcome to come on this side of the wooden, whatever it's called, wall. I didn't want to call it a barrier, but you're more than welcome to come on this side if you'd like. That wall is about as porous as our border. Come on this side if you'd like. And then obviously members of the committee, you're welcome to have a seat up front. I know we have other members here who are here too. Senator Williams, thank you for being very involved in this process. Representative Mathiak and others who may want to join us.
Shut.
Mr. Leader, I think you're on the committee. I'll call the July 25th Joint Committee on Licensing Issues meeting to order. We have quite a full agenda today. Some of the people who may be speaking to us may not be used to coming before a legislative committee. That's perfectly fine. I want you to know it's not extremely formal, but your testimony is extremely important. We will ask you some questions likely. You want to go ahead and get ahead of some of those. My questions are going to be, how often does your board meet? How many licenses have you approved? How many licenses are not yet approved? Have you had issues with quorums? Things like that, so we can get an understanding of really just how your board works and what issues we might be able to help you resolve. There may be some other comments. We do ask, if you don't mind, if you can't hang around to the end, that you have someone who's associated with your board or affiliated with your board hang around, because we do know that there's members of the public who have heard about this meeting as well, who are here in attendance hoping to get issues resolved. So please, if you can't stay, let us know who the person who's affiliated with your organization or your board that will be staying, so we can help direct constituents that way who have driven awfully long hours at many times just to be here today to try to resolve issues that they've been working on for quite some time. Chairman Hatchett, do you have any opening comments you'd like to make?
Thank you, Chairman Tillery. Just pleased to see nice attendance today, and hope everything goes smoothly, and look forward to hearing from all the boards and learning much. So with that, I'll turn it back to you.
We're going to give the members on the committee a chance to introduce themselves very, very briefly, and then we will hear from our first presenter, which will be the Board of Nursing. Start on my far right with Senator Mallow.
Thank you, Chairman Tillery. Senator Derek Mallow, representing the 2nd Senatorial District out of Savannah. And of course, I took I-16 this morning.
Good morning, Larry Walker, Senate District 20, 8 counties in Middle Georgia. I chair the Insurance and Labor Committee in the Senate, and I chaired a study committee last summer on occupational licensure, and I'm quite interested in our testimony today.
Good morning, I'm Steve Gooch, Senate District 51, which encompasses Dawson, Lumpkin, White, Fannin, Gilmer, Pickens. Good to be with everyone.
I'm Blake Tillery. I chair the Senate Appropriations Committee. I represent 11 counties in southeast Georgia, and Vidalia is my hometown.
Matt Hatchett. I represent District 155 in Middle Georgia, Lawrence County, and Johnson County.
I'm Chairman Marcus Wiedauer. I chair the subcommittee for general government appropriations, and I get to win the argument every time, exactly where is God's country, which is Watkinsville, Athens, Georgia. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Brian Prince, State Representative, House District 132. I represent parts of Richmond County, which is Augusta, and I have all of Jefferson County.
Good morning, I'm Chuck F. Stration. I serve as Majority Leader. I represent parts of Gwinnett and Barrow County.
Danny, you want to go to the podium? No, you're not. You want to get in the hot seat? Thank you.
Thank you all for being here today. We appreciate your attendance, and we know the members of the public do as well. We have a full agenda. I think there's 6 or 7 boards that are set to talk. I know people's attention span, usually we lose them after about an hour total. So we know that this will go more than an hour today. It's expected to. But I do ask, as you're presenting, to please stick to basic facts. Be as conscientious as you can of time, and please get the facts out that you need. Realizing that what we're looking at doing is trying to figure out how we streamline a licensing process. Tell us the problems that you're having, if we can help you do that. And then if there's a reason that you think that we may decide that that license is no longer needed, if you want to defend the license, feel free to do that as well. Our first presenter will be from the Board of Nursing, and if you don't mind, while I do know who this one is, if you don't mind, when you get up to the podium, please state your name and your title and where you're from. Thanks.
And there is a sign-up sheet up here if anybody else wants to speak that's not, quote, on the agenda. It's up here. We'll be taking it up shortly.
Good morning. My name is Ashlyn Porter. I am the president of the Georgia Board of Nursing. I am from Tattnall County, which is in South Georgia. I am very excited to be here today. A little nervous, it's kind of intimidating, but I hope to share with you a lot of information about the Georgia Board of Nursing and what we are doing to help with licensure. I would like to first say good morning to Chairman Hatchett, Chairman Tillery, Blue Ribbon Committee members, and guests. I am Ashlyn Porter. I am a registered nurse for the Georgia Board of Nursing. I was appointed in January of 2020 by Governor Kemp. I have served as president of the Georgia Board of Nursing since October of 2023. It is an honor to serve on this board, and I am very thankful to Governor Kemp for placing me on the board. And it's an honor to come today to share with you about the Board of Nursing. I have been on the board for 4.5 years, and from what I can tell you at that it is very vital that we have this board. I have truly learned the importance of having a nursing board in the state of Georgia. Without the board and the PLB staff assigned directly to the Board of Nursing, the public would not be protected. It is our job to ensure there are competent nurses in our state, nurses who have graduated from educational programs that meet the standards laid out by the board, and that those licensed nurses are doing their profession in a safe manner and within the scope of practices laid out by the board. The board and its staff are entrusted to assist the board are vital to our state. Its operations, if the operations are not run smoothly, the nursing shortage will not improve, and more importantly, lives will be in danger. Nursing is a truly wonderful profession, a calling, some say. The men and women who serve in this profession deserve a board and an administration who helps them continue their role in nursing in a timely manner. To start with, I want to provide some background information on the Georgia Board of Nursing. We have 13 members on the board. We are appointed by the Governor of Georgia to serve no more than 2 3-year terms, so each member can serve a total of 6 years. This is a service board. We have signed an oath to protect the public through our service on this board. As a whole board, we have a 2-day in-person meeting in Macon at the Secretary of State's office on the months of January, March, May, July, September, and November. In the other months, we meet virtually for around 2 hours in the afternoon. We also have board members divided into 2 committees that meet once every month virtually. So every member of our board participates in at least 2 meetings per month. In order to prepare for these meetings, we spend hours reviewing discipline cases, education reports, correspondence from our executive director, such as emails, standard of practice questions. We go over governance memos, strategic plans, such as new position statements. And in order for us to be prepared for these meetings, our staff that are assigned to the Georgia Board of Nursing work tirelessly to prepare discipline case files, provide education updates on all nursing programs. During our in-person meetings, we may have investigative interviews with nurses who are on discipline. We may have personal appearances with applicants about licensure denial. And we may also converse with the Attorney General's office concerning orders or why a certain nurse is not meeting their orders. Our sole responsibility of the Georgia Board of Nursing is the protection of the public health, safety, and welfare. And it is our duty as a board member to license those persons seeking to enter the profession who meet the minimum legal competency standards necessary to practice and to discipline those who fall short of meeting those standards. In order to do this, we have 4 categories. I would like to describe a little bit about each one of them, just so you know where we're at. First, we have education. This is one of the biggest components of our board. It's responsible for the regulation of LPN and RN programs. So we accomplish this by reviewing proposals for new education programs. We review existing nursing education programs, and then also we ensure compliance with all board regulations. Such changes in faculty members, such changes in curriculum have to be presented to the board for our approval. And we go over these each month and approve those. It is our job as a board to review these reports once our education director presents them to us. Currently, right now, we have 95 nursing programs in the state of Georgia, but we only have 1 education consultant. So we have 1 person who is doing all of this work for all 95 schools. The education consultant must monitor all of this activity within the nursing program and then report it to the board each month. And without our education consultant, schools could graduate nurses who are not prepared to practice, resulting in public harm. You may have heard about the Nightingale incidents that happened in Florida. So that was kind of a result of one of these. Education was not being monitored correctly, so therefore you have fraudulent schools form, and then nurses graduate from fraudulent schools. So it's very important with education that we have the nursing consultant and we have enough staff to do the education. Next is licensure, which is what I understand is what we want to discuss today. Licensure, we ensure that all the staff are licensing individuals that meet the statutory and regulatory requirements for licensure and have the necessary education and training. We also work on practice. This involves like laws and scope of practice in the Nurse Practice Act. Currently, we have released position statements. They have been posted on our website about IV hydration and Botox clinics, because that is a big topic. We're currently working on a statement for the administration of ketamine. We also collaborate with lawmakers. We collaborate with the governor on making rule changes to these rules and laws. For example, we are working on the military medic to the LPN transition program. That was just approved by Senate Bill 449. We are working on this. And we are currently working with Veteran Services. We're getting requirements for a transition curriculum. We're collaborating with other states, trying to figure out how to do a bridge program for this. At this point, a military medic could come to the board and apply through our system and then sit for the LPN NCLEX while we are working on the bridge program, and then they can complete that as well. As far as discipline goes, we also are in charge of discipline nursing, nurses who do not enforce the Georgia Nurse Practice Act. We have complaints that are sent in, and then once the complaint is reviewed by staff, they are prioritized as high, low, or medium, and then they're processed, and then they're sent to the Office of Investigations, and they're investigated. Currently, we have an average of 200 complaints per month that are sent to the nursing board about nurses who are doing something they're not supposed to or not following the scope of practice. Currently, as far as consent orders, we have 367 nurses who are on a consent order right now in our office. And we have 7 disciplinary staff members who are working on those consent orders and making sure they're meeting all their terms of those. Now I would like to address 2 of the questions I hear the most, and perhaps 2 of the questions you hear the most from your constituents about licensure. Why can't I get my license sooner? I became a registered nurse in 2010 and immediately went into public health, working for the state of Georgia. As a former employee of the state of Georgia, I am familiar with the many challenges of adequate funding for operations. Since I have joined the board in 2020, I think our biggest challenge is that nursing is growing in the state of Georgia. However, there is not enough resources in the PLB to accommodate that. Currently, the staff dedicated to the Georgia Board of Nursing are working very diligently to process applications, manage disciplinary cases, ensure schools' education requirements are being met, all while answering correspondence. However, there are just not enough staff to handle the increased volume. The board and I have spent a lot of time figuring out why we have this problem, and a lot of time talking with other nursing boards across the country to learn from them. I would like to discuss some specific numbers with you. Stats pertaining to new license application. These are your new nurses, your graduates, the ones who are coming from out of state, who aren't really endorsing, but just your new licensures, okay? In the fiscal year 2024, our board received 24,000 new applications. This number has nearly doubled over the last decade. In May of 2024, our board received 3,141 applications. So May is a big graduation month in the state of Georgia. Our analysts had to process all of that. Currently, we only have 6 analysts for the RNs and the LPNs, and we only have 2 analysts for the APRNs. Our analysts have a heavy workload. As the licensed analysts process this application, if there are missing documents or the applications are not completed correctly, our analysts then have to communicate with the applicant all the deficiencies. It's our analysts who ensure that every applicant, they must meet the education requirements, they must ensure the applicants pass the criminal background check, they must ensure the applicant has legal rights to be present in the United States, and they must ensure the applicant has passed the national license test and all other requirements before they become a nurse. It's an enormous job. And when an application is missing something, it's the analysts who work with the nurse applicant to get the right information in. And if there are red flags, it is again the analysts who figure out everything and make a recommendation. It's an enormous job, and our staff has done a tremendous job of doing the best they can, but we just don't have the number of staff members to get everything done in the way it must be done and in the time we want it to be done. Currently, we have 173,463 nurses in the state of Georgia. These are LPNs, RNs, and advanced practice nurses. Board staff is also responsible for not only doing the new application, all the new graduates, but we're also in charge of renewing these licenses every 2 years. This includes reviewing the application and auditing continuing education so we can make sure the nurses are up to date. With the number of licenses that we have, the workload for renewals is extensive. I mentioned a minute ago that the board has given a lot of thought to this, and we have asked other state nursing boards how to operate. Well, here is what we have learned. This is pertaining to new application. Florida has 43 staff members dedicated to processing application, and we have 8 staff members. Louisiana has 1 more staff member than we do, and we have 5 times more applications than Louisiana does. The closest state to ours in terms of number of applications is Washington State. They have 23 staff members reviewing applications. Again, we have 8. So as you see from these statistics, nursing in Georgia is greatly on the rise. And in order to keep up with the influx of nurses, we as a state must collaborate to ensure staff can handle this influx of applications to get more competent nurses licensed and keep them licensed. The second question, why can't I get anybody on the phone? The call center is operated by the Secretary of State's office, and that's the way the nurses get in touch with us. The call center employees field calls for all licensing areas, but we receive the nursing stats every month from the call center. From the nursing stats, we see a real problem in what is happening in the call center. Last year, those calling into the call center for nursing concerns had their calls answered promptly, and it's just not happened promptly anymore. We're not seeing an increase in the number of calls regarding nursing, so I don't know what the problem is, but we're seeing a problem. It's taking way too long for nurses to actually talk to someone, and the number of people who call and give up before talking to someone at the call center is through the roof. It's a huge problem that is having a real impact. I don't know what the cause of the issue is. Operating the call center is a Secretary of State function rather than a nursing board function, but it must be fixed. In closing, I would just like to say what a wonderful job the staff that works for the Board of Nursing is doing. In particular, our Executive Director, Natera Taylor, is an amazing leader who's been asking the questions you all have been asking for months, trying to make the nurse licensure process an effective one, the kind of process that Georgia nurses deserve. Improvements must be paid, but the staff that works for the Georgia Board of Nursing is part of the solution. They are not the problem. I look forward to working with the committee and other members of the General Assembly in the coming weeks and months on fixing the problems we've talked about today. I welcome the committee's questions at this time or at the proper time. I will answer them to the best of my ability, and thank you truly for caring about Georgia nurses.
Thank you, Ms. Porter. Members of the committee, do you have any questions, starting with Senator Walker? Or Vallow, sorry.
Senator Walker are joint. We got joint questions here. He's copied my paper, I've copied his. So go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator. Ashland, first of all, thank you for your service. I can't imagine what a tremendously difficult job you have, and you're serving the citizens of Georgia, and it's remarkable that you're willing to dedicate yourself to that. So thank you very much. Do you have any idea what the license revenue is annually from the nurses' licenses?
Thank you very much for that question. I do not have that information with me, but I will be glad to get that information for you as well.
I think we'd
yes.
find that interesting. I wondered just talk a little bit about process, if you would.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody submits a new application, I think you said there was 24,000 new applications in 2024, which is incredible. And of course, we still talk about a nursing shortage, so we don't want to have any pinch points in that process if we can avoid it. What does that process look like? Is it an online application?
It is an online application, so the applicant must fill out the application, provide any kind of transcript, education. They must have a criminal background check. And then once they're approved, they sit for the NCLEX. So the NCLEX is the actual test, the licensing test. So sometimes that could be the holdup. Currently, we have 1,830 licenses pending. And so if a license pending goes over the 60 days, the nurse has to then reapply. So what the holdup is with those 1,830 that we have pending right now, the holdup could be the nurse didn't send all the documents, the nurse didn't pass the criminal background check, or the nurse failed the test, the NCLEX test, so they need to retake it again.
Do they have to pay a fee again?
I believe so. I'm not
Okay.
100% on that.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I got a few more, sorry. So you mentioned missing, that the staff is reviewing these applications, 24,000 of them, to see if there's missing information. If it's an online process, why would it let you move forward if there's missing information?
That's a great question also.
And how in
I'm
the
not
world
sure
are they
on
reviewing
that.
24,000
Yes.
applications? I mean, it seems like automation could take care of some of that.
Absolutely.
And then getting back to the NCLEX, is that a problem with the vendor for the testing? Because I've heard complaints that there's a backlog on being able to get tested.
To testing, and that would be through the NCLEX. That has nothing to do with us. So it could be, at one time, there was a huge backlog.
But I mean, do you, the
because of
board
criminal
chooses the
background
vendor,
check.
or who chooses NCLEX? Or are they the only one?
NCLEX is through NCSBN, yes. And NCLEX is for the entire state of Georgia, yes.
So what if you changed the 60 days to 90? Would that help? I mean, is that a board rule, or?
It is, yes, sir.
Okay.
But that is something, I mean, we can, once again, discuss and see if that would help. The main thing is, you know, you're processing this many applications, but if they're deficient, the staff member has to wait for the applicant to give in the, you know, to bring the documents in, or to email them or mail them. Some are mailing them, you know, and it's just not a very efficient process as far as that. So therefore, they're pending. Yes.
You said something about consent orders.
Mm-hmm.
I think you told us how many complaints, 200 complaints a month.
Yes, sir.
And then what is the consent order where y'all have
So the consent
told
order.
them to cease and desist practicing?
Yes, it could be that. It could be a private or a public consent order. So public is actually published in the magazine, so you can see that nurse. Also goes on the license. So that could be a nurse who has practiced under the influence. Maybe they had patient abuse. They did something to break the standard of practice. So they're put on a consent order for a certain number of years. And basically, we are monitoring their license. They have to send in reports either from themselves or from aftercare. A lot of them do aftercare through GNA, or they may have to do employer reports. They have to take courses. But it is a way of us allowing those nurses who did not practice according to their scope, they can still practice, but they are being monitored at the same time.
Thank you. You said there were 95 nurse education programs in Georgia.
Yes, sir.
Are all of those accredited?
Yes, sir. They are.
So if they're accredited, how much time do you spend on reviewing curriculum if they're
That would be our nurse education consultant. She does that. So basically, when they become accredited or we review their curriculum, it's already been done. They're approved by us. And then if they have any changes to the curriculum, we then look at that. So, yes.
But isn't the accreditation vetting that program anyway? I mean, are y'all duplicating?
Yes, but according to our board rules, we also look at that as well. So,
Is that
but yes.
a big expenditure or resource to do that, or? Okay.
No, sir.
On the renewal process, how automated is that? Are y'all having to touch
That's every 2 years.
173,000 renewal?
So it's every 2 years.
But is somebody touching each one of those?
That's a good question. I would have to ask our executive director. Those are through electronic, so they're not near as much providing as much information because their education doesn't have to be reviewed, and there's no criminal background check. You're basically just hitting a couple of boxes and renewing those, and make sure you have no arrest. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank
You're
you for
welcome.
indulging me, Mr. Chairman.
We just have one more question.
We did not do that. Last question I have, who reviews the rules of the Board of Nursing? Is there a list of rules that the board has adopted? And does someone check to make sure that those rules are not in conflict with state statute?
Yes, we review those as well, and we are actually going through those right now to try to update on those. So our executive director works on that.
Ashlyn, thank you for all the questions and answers, and I think probably everybody up here's got quite a few questions, including me. Congratulations, you're the new face of Georgia nurses. The 60-day application period.
Yes, sir.
And so if I start my application, I have 60 days to complete it. And that is a board
Statute.
set that in place, okay?
Correct.
So that's new. I think you said you have 8 analysts.
Yes.
6 looking at licenses for nurses and 2 looking at licenses for APRNs. And then you have 1 education consultant.
Mm-hmm.
Are those all employees of Secretary of State of Georgia?
Yes.
Okay. You fall under the state, your staff falls under the state,
Yes.
y'all are not autonomous in any way?
The executive director, and I think I can't give you the exact, there's 20-something members of this, employees of the Secretary of State's office are concentrate on the Board of Nursing.
So 20, there's over 20?
It's about 20-ish. Mhm.
So do you know what the other positions, are they call center that are supposed to be dedicated to
They
you?
are, and my executive director can get you the exact, they are, one of them works with the AG's office, the Attorney
Okay.
General's offices with the consent orders. There's discipline nurses who work on, there's 7 of those discipline staff. They work with all the consent orders. And then there's also Tara, and there's also some people like in admin positions. Yes, but the call center is with the Secretary of State's office. That is not included, the 20.
So I'm sure we'll get a breakdown of everybody that's assigned to the Board of Nursing. I was looking at the person I know from the Secretary of State's office that's in here. So in our previous meeting, it was brought up that some of the applicants, not of nursing, but other areas too, they would learn that their application is deficient, but they would have no idea where the deficiency was. Do y'all communicate that deficiency
They
back
do.
to the?
Yes, they actually, it is mailed or emailed what is deficient, an actual letter that says, this is deficient, you must do this.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's done through
Yes.
the U.S. mail?
Yes.
Okay.
Some
But
of
it
them.
could be done through a telephone call, or
It could be,
if they
and some
happen
of
to
them-
call,
and some
or
of
it
the
could be done
analysts-
by email?
It can be, and
Okay.
some of the analysts may do that, but
Okay.
then it is up to the applicant to then send it back
To
in.
respond, right.
And then it is then gone back through with the analyst, but while they're waiting, they're constantly going through other new applications, so it's when they get back to the other ones as well.
So, thank you. The testing, and this is something that I think is an issue with all the boards. When I go take the test, and if I do not pass, do I find out what I missed? Can you tell me why that is? Do you know?
Okay, so, and this is coming from my experience when I took the test, you get like 200, I think, and 75 questions. And basically, when you're taking the test, it shuts off when it thinks that you can practice with reasonable skill and safety. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it does not tell you what it missed. But now a lot of our schools, nursing schools, are actually doing practice tests and everything, and that can tell them what areas that they need to concentrate on so they can pass the test.
Well, I would think that we need to look at that whole testing mechanism, because I took a test for a certain license I have, and I went through the whole test, and you didn't know until you walked out of the room if you passed or not.
Oh, yes.
And then you did not find out if you did not pass, you could not find out what you missed.
Absolutely.
And to me, that's just, I don't understand that at all.
Yes,
So-
and you either just pass, or fail, but you can also take, remediation courses, or you can take other kind of private.
Right, but then if you don't know what you're not proficient in, then how
Yeah.
do you remediate?
Yeah.
Thank you. Who else?
Ms. Porter, thank you for being here. I think it's important for us to point this out, too. You're not a paid employee of the state.
Yes.
You're a citizen who serves on the board. I want to point that out, because if my questions come across as pointed or you don't know them, I
Yes.
understand. You are the
A volunteer.
volunteer of the board. A few questions I have. Does every state use the NCLEX?
Yes, I believe that is correct. Yes, I'm looking at Gina. Yes, that is correct.
Because I know that we have some other boards later on that we may talk to that had picked their test and just trying to figure out why those tests are picked. The second, does every state renew every nurse every year?
I can get you information on that. I'm not sure, but thank you for that question. We renew every 2 years.
Every two.
Yes.
That's just one of the things I'm wondering of.
Okay.
If I mean, you've got 173,000 nurses, 24,000 this year, which I think is a testament really to the General Assembly and the governor, the focus we've placed. I mean, you've got 1/6 or 1/7 of your applicants are new.
Absolutely.
That's impressive. But, and I understand a greater review process when someone first applies. It does seem, though, that once you get to the renewal process, that we might be able to help streamline that and focus more of the attention on the new applicants. As someone in your position who meets with other boards, what are you seeing other states do? I heard what you said about 43 folks in Florida, 9 in Louisiana, and the comparable areas. Are you seeing states move towards licensing more things, pull back from licensing things? What's the overall trend? Or have you seen that in your position?
From the other boards, the biggest strength I see is they just have more people that are dedicated to their boards working in there. And they're helping like streamline the licensure process so it's faster. And they're also receiving more funding to help run their boards as well. They are producing more kind of position statements or, collaborating with the governor or the legislation a lot more to help update some of these rules. We need to update some of these rules and these policies to help kind of nurses move forward. But the biggest thing I can see, from those is just more employees. I mean, really, that's what they have working for them, so they can get more done. There's so much that I have noticed being president of the board that we would like to do as a board. We want to do more position statements. We want to have better communication with our nurses, like that says, hey, are you doing this? You don't need to be doing that. They just don't have any information out there. But our staff cannot help us do that because they're so focused on the other task. Yeah, if that makes sense.
It does. Does your board have to approve every license, or is there a process that the license stands approved, but for your board disapproving it?
Okay,
Help me
so
understand
just kind of I'll walk you through that. So when you apply, if you're renewing, okay, it is renewed, you can go ahead and continue to practice. And then every month, we have a grid of every nurse that has renewed the license, and we approve that. So you are never stopping your practice. Yes, you're never stopping your practice, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
I think it does. I have one last question. We've heard testimony that some boards literally can't get a quorum to meet to approve licenses at times. Has that been an issue? Is there any issue there?
Mm-mm. We have a wonderful board of 13 members, and if they can't, we really try to do a in-person meeting every other month for 2 days, so that way we can fire questions off, figure out issues that are happening in the hospitals, what kind of resources hospitals need in Georgia, and we really fire things off. That's every other month. We have a 2-day meeting, and then on the off months, we have about a 2-hour virtual meeting where we go over all cases and we approve more licenses and talk about any other issues. So we are really, technically, we are doing a lot of work for this board. Yes.
Any other questions of the members? Representative Chairman Weehour.
Thank you for being here. Curious on disciplinary inquiries. Can you quantify? Is there a number that result in removal or?
I don't have that number with me. I can get it from my executive director. We do occasionally, just from experience, me being on the board, I can tell you, we do have to call special meetings sometimes to summarily suspend a license. And that would be an instance if a physician on their mental physical exam, they have to get those, says the nurse is not safe to practice. So if they have been told by a physician that they are not safe to practice, we do have to suspend their license. But those are rare, but we do have to do those occasionally. Or if they do not follow their consent order and they have broken it, we do vote to suspend their license.
And then, different subject, I guess, but what level of nurse, so do you guys handle nurse practitioners as well, or?
Nurse practitioner, LPNs,
Okay.
RNs, and APRNs, advanced practicing registered nurse.
And then just to sum it up real quick, employees, let's just run it down real quick, of what you know are associated directly with Board of Nursing. What do you have at your ready?
Could you
So
repeat it?
Secretary of State, you got a call center, obviously, we don't know
Yes.
exactly how many, we'll get that number.
That
but-
is the call center is in Atlanta, so our
Right.
whole board is located in Macon.
Yep.
So, and we have, as far as I know, around 20 employees, okay? We have an executive director. We have nurses who are discipline nurses, and they are in charge of all the consent orders. And we also have staff that assist those nurses with the discipline, and there's 7 of those. And then we have, like I said, the 6 licensing analysts for RNs and LPNs and the 2 for APRNs. We also have a few support staff who work with the AG's office as well. And this whole staff is in charge, and 1 education consultant. So this whole staff in all of this process ensured we're licensing, education, practice, and yes, and renewals and everything, yes.
And are they in the office every day, or what's the?
Yes, I think I think they come into the office, this is all COVID, so I have been in this since COVID. I'm pretty sure the executive director, I'd have to get with her, but a lot of them work virtually, which is great, because it allows, people who don't have to live in Macon to work, as well. But they do come into the office at least once or twice a week, yes, and they work virtually.
Which just spurred another question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
So, do you have trouble staffing those positions?
That would be an executive director question. I'm sorry, I cannot ask that. I do know from reports, because they do, yes,
Is your executive director here?
sir.
Is the executive director here?
Is the executive director, she is not here today. As far as staffing, I will say she gives us updates every meeting, Tara does, and they are constantly having staffing issues. Yes, either so one of our big licensing renewal periods, she was down 2 analysts. So, they were working constantly. She was doing them, stepping in, other nurses were stepping in and helping, but there is a big turnover. Since I have been there, I have had 5 executive directors, and then several different AGs as well. But yes, there is a lot of turnover, yes.
This might get into an opinion question, but what is your opinion on that turnover? What is the catalyst for that? What is
the opinion, one more time, sorry?
Why is there such turnover?
Why is there such
Do you have an
turmoil?
opinion on why the turnover is what it is?
I
Money?
don't really, it could be money. I used to be a state employee. It could be the money, it could be just constantly looking for a position, at in a different level, or going private, I think that's something as well. But, yes, I'm not real sure why the turnover is high, though.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Chairman Prince.
Thank you, Chairman, but Representative Weed, I asked the question I wanted to ask, reference, were they working from home or?
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Well, thank you very much for your time and your information.
Thank you so much for your time. And thank you
It
once
wasn't so
again.
bad, was it?
Not too bad. And thank you again for caring about Georgia nurses. It is an honor to serve Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next up is the Board of Residential and General Contractors. Good morning.
Morning. We really, first of all, I'm Steve Bowman. I'm the chairman of the General Contractors Licensing Board. This is Lana Cavassa. We really found out about this a little later and didn't make a formal presentation, and came really as here to answer questions and provide feedback. But fortunately, we had somebody that went before us and gave us kind of a template to respond to. So hopefully that'll help.
That is fine. That's great.
I'll tell you a little bit about our board and some of our numbers as we know it, and maybe that'll give us some good ammunition for feedback. We have about 12,000 different licensed contractors among the residential and general contractors, which is a little misleading because if you look, there will be roughly 24,000 different license holders, and they're paired up in large cases as a qualifying agent and a company. So they come in sort of as pairs, but they're really just half that as companies in majority of the cases. We have 7 members on our board that, again, as you noted earlier, we are all volunteers and we all have our day jobs and generally are general contractors. We do require that we have one person that is a code enforcement agent or former one, so it is in our board, and we have an architect. The rest are general contractors. The way the application process works is that the applications come in, they go to the staff. The staff has the ability to review and approve those that are easily discernible, for lack of a better term to describe it. Those that are not so clear are referred to the people on the board to further investigate and try to remove the ambiguity. Our board, and I can't really speak to the others, is not so much a checkbox type system. There is a lot of clarification, a lot of things that have to be discerned based on experience. It's not a trade that really always has a degree or an educational background that lends itself to being a contractor. You have to have either an education plus experience or just experience combined to qualify. So due to that, there is a lot to review. We have a very limited number of analysts in our staff that reviews these. We only have, I think, 3 full-time people, and they do bounce around between our board and the residential board. We're just the commercial side of it. Feel free to chime in if I miss something. Right now, we do know that our current waiting time is far too long.
check, check, check.
One side was Neds and one side was 341. So mine went out good pass.
Yeah, he's right. Right.
So you're gonna skip the video or what?
I asked him if he thinks he needs it, and he said nobody's told him that he has any presentations. So I just turned it off, but.
All righty, we're going to get back on track. Thank you. Let me say a couple of thank yous. First of all, appreciate Maggie Hasty for being here today. There's a lot of folks who've had questions in the interim, and Maggie, thank you so much for working to answer them. Also appreciate the board members who've been here. As we mentioned previously, these aren't paid positions, and I know you're getting a lot of questions from people who've come to this meeting to get answers. I really appreciate that while we hope it's important for legislation and changes that come, the immediate help we can provide is with people whose licenses are pending right now, so thanks for your presence. Next on the agenda, I got to find the agenda.
Private Detectives and Security Agencies.
The Board of Private Detectives and Security Agencies. If you don't mind, step up, just let us know who you are. Appreciate it. Good morning. Hang on, I just hit the wrong button. Give me 1 second. Here we go. Hit the button. All righty, you're on.
I think so. We're on. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invite to come here. It's an honor to be here. I am Pam Griggs. I am the chair of the Georgia Board of Private Detectives and Security Agencies. I have brought two of my colleagues with me, Jason Peacock and Trip Mitchell, that are going to be able to speak on a lot of this. I have been up for several days taking care of a family member in the hospital, and I am going to yield my time over to Jason and Trip because they've had time to gather some of the stats, the information that you needed. But we are all here to answer any questions you may have.
So I guess you could say they're your security, right?
They're the best.
I couldn't resist.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Joel Peacock. I am on the board of Private Detective and Security Agencies, and I'll tell you that as a small business owner and being in this industry for almost 30 years, it's an honor to be on the board, and I do appreciate it. I take this board seriously, as I think everyone should, because we give permits to people to carry guns. So when we're talking about keeping the public safe, I think that is really important that we do that. We've got a smaller board than the nursing board. I'm glad she went first to set the bar too high for us to get there. But you know, we're going to do our best. We've got roughly just under 7,000 licenses, and that could be private investigators, security companies. I will tell you that unarmed security officers do not actually hold a license. So you take those thousands of those that are out there, that doesn't really factor into this. We, as a business owner, I myself have had challenges with the licensing system. I think one of the biggest issues, one of the biggest concerns that we've ran into is the way the licenses, the regs have been written is pushing 40 years old, and we need to update our regs, and that would affect the way the licensing is done. Unfortunately, right now I hold 4 different licenses, being a company, an armed officer, and a trainer, and then also do work for another company as well. If I go to work for another company, I have to start from scratch. Even though I'm a trainer, I'm a board member, I've had my own company for almost 20 years. My licenses have never lapsed. If I go to work for another company or want a contract for another company, I have to start from scratch. And that's with every person out there. So we've got some challenges that we face with the licensing, the way the regs are set up. Also, one of our challenges, and the general contractors touched on this, is the enforcement. If we get a lot of complaints about unlicensed practice, we send the investigators out. If they find someone to be unlicensed, then we issue cease and desist orders, and most of the time that works. If that doesn't work, then we have a challenge, because we have individuals out there that are basically thumbing their nose up at the board saying, I'm going to run a company, and there's not really much you can do about it. And they're carrying weapons, they're advertising carrying weapons, and we can't validate training, we can't validate, they're even legal to carry a weapon. And the enforcement of that is something that we have a really large challenge with. Regarding any of that, Trip Mitchell is going to cover that. Trip has been on the board for the longest out of all of us, and he has some things he would like to say as well. But thank you for your time.
Good morning. My name is Trip Mitchell. I have been appointed board member since 2003. I am the longest serving board member of the Georgia Board of Private Detective and Security Agencies. I have been through 3 Secretary of States, numerous Attorney Generals, several executive directors, and I have seen the trend, and we have tried to address this many times, and I want to tell you how grateful I am that for the first time the legislators have called board members. We've never had board members come to be asked to speak to this particular committee, and this is a privilege for us to be able to engage on this level. Many of you know me from the Middle Georgia area. I'm here in my individual capacity here as a board member who's been appointed a former chair. And what I want to do is, instead of the opportunity to do, I think the nursing board did an outstanding job of giving you the overall 30,000 view of how licensing operates in Georgia. We have much more similarities to those as far as how it trends within the system, because there's 33, I believe, licensing boards, and we are among that. The Georgia Board of Private Detective and Security Agencies, to give you a little bit of history, is made up of 7 appointed members. 2 members are licensed private detectives, 2 members are licensed security professionals, then there is a law enforcement, there's a citizens at large, and the director of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. They serve on our board and evaluate whether or not the individual who comes forward has the character as well as the competency to carry a license in the state of Georgia. It is important to note that we assume that there is this misconception of what board members are, but I want to clarify that board members, as our chairs have said today, we are individual practitioners and we have full-time jobs. This is voluntary for us. And so when there's communications about board, the board are supported by the Secretary of State's office, and I would say that our board has a wonderful executive director in Brad Coleman, a very good support staff that are under-resourced, no doubt about that. But I do know that throwing money at it doesn't just always help the situation, and what I want to do is give you some insight on how we operate. We operate under Title 43, 38, 1 through 16. 43, 38, 1 through 16. That code section says that we as board members who are appointed to evaluate the actual competency and character of the individual can make a determination using our discretion whether or not that particular person should hold a license in Georgia. There's different types of licenses, but the primary concept is there is a company license, which is an individual can start an organization, and then there is a registration. A registration is considered a license, but that is working under a company. Any armed individual that wants to carry a firearm has to go through the company to get authorized to carry, and through the state. So when we talk about licenses in a big basket, what we're really talking about are company licenses and registrations. Company licenses do give us challenges because we're trying to make sure that the individual who's going to run the company, that's going to be insured, that's going to go out and market and do all this stuff, are really protecting the public. Our main goal, and I think this is what's important, is, when somebody complains about the board and there's no either discretion or they think that the board members can do certain things, I think it's important to note that we take an oath of office to protect the consumer. We've stood up and I've taken numerous oaths of office in front of governors to say that I'm going to protect the consumer. And sometimes it does become adversarial with the people that we're licensing. But we also try to keep the consumer in check. We're sworn to protect the consumer overall. Now, the other thing is, as the chair said, we don't have offices. We don't have any staff that works directly with us. We are a board that is supported by the Secretary of State's office with 0 administrative controls and authority. The only authority we have is to vote yes or no, or make recommendations on what the license should do. So when someone calls into the call center, you think you get calls, we get plenty, because it's our peers that are calling us and complaining. And we can't call the Secretary of State's office and say, can you get XYZ off the stack, please? We can't do it. Then we're also issues about who our stakeholders are. The email that I received talked about network actors. So I'm going to give you a rundown of who our network actors are. The Secretary of State's office is our support function. The Attorney General's office gives us legal advice through an Attorney General that provides legal guidance. We also have the board members, of course, and then we have two non-governmental actors that are in there, which is our third-party fingerprint identification system that is contracted through the GBI, as well as our third-party testing unit called Prometrics, I believe is the last one that is our contract. We may have shifted to a new one, forgive me. And those are a perfect bureaucratic storm. It's a perfect bureaucratic storm. So what we try to do as board members is we meet every month. 6 in-persons and 6 teleconferences. And I can tell you from my experience with the board is when the executive director gets backed up, he contacts the chair or someone else and says, we are backed up, can we put another one on? And the majority of our board members to serve the public will get on there and we'll make it happen. And we actually shifted a board meeting today to be here, but we wouldn't been able to be here. So we had to balance the people's business, but we felt that the people's business is more important to get this straight. So we had to really shift to make sure that we get the people's business done, and we said we were going to set it in 4 days to make sure that it continues with business continuity. A lot of the questions that come up are issues about processing delays. I know that may be a situation that's on your mind. Technically, what I'm understanding is it's about 19 days to process a registration. That is the issue of being a pristine license, meaning someone goes online, and I think Senator Walker made a great point, is how does somebody go online and it allows you to go to the next level, and I think that's a terrific point. It should stop you and say you're not here yet. But however, when we talk about pristine documents, we're putting the applicant in a position to be able to start the process online. There's also a learning curve. I can tell you in my experience, this is the second online system. The first was the Bridge, which was our old system, and now with the goals. And all of our license holders, including ourselves, had to learn the learning curve of the new system. And as this new system navigates, we're finding that we have to still have challenges to upgrade, upload, and things, but we're navigating them. But pristine apps come to us, we can process those pretty fast. But what happens is when individuals leave out information, then it goes back to the stack. And we don't have enough resources to keep the stack moving to say we have to follow up. Hence, many of your questions about the 30-day, 60-day, 90-day delays of when the application just dies. Many people, they just die on the table because they don't have enough time to get the information back, communicate it, try to communicate and build that bridge. Another factor that we're seeing in the security industry, the last statistic I saw is we have 4 security officers in North America to every 1 police officer. It is a different scope of practice. And so when we deal with the fact that we're trying to get security people in place to protect our infrastructure, to protect people, things like that, we're looking at these public safety issues and we're bogged down by different areas that we have to compete with. For example, we have a statute that was written in 1983. We have made, as board members who are non-lobbyists, have attempted to approach the legislature to work through some of our issues. Many of the things that have been addressed were more targeted towards a particular statute, but what we really need is a legislative overhaul that brings it to 2024 and streamline the process that puts us in a position that we can get it across the finish line. Because as you know, that anytime you do something public safety, we have to go through several committees, and we have to get the blessing of the Chiefs Association, which I am a proud member of, and the Sheriff's Association, and dealing with all of the political issues that we have to navigate. Legislation change over the 20-year span that I've been here has been extremely difficult for us to get across the finish line. We have had many that said this will work, but unfortunately, when it's piecemealed, there's unintended consequences that come from that create even more delays, because now we have to get the Attorney General to chime in on whether or not we have legal authority to continue this process. And I can give you specific examples if you have questions, but I want to just hit the 30,000-foot view. I think that overall, when it talks about some consumer protection and issues, a couple of things for opportunities for improvement. First, streamline our Title 43, where it's up to date, and work with the board members that are actually applying the standards to say what we need. During our last presentation, I think it was very notable that they were talking about whether or not a staff member at the Secretary of State's office can evaluate experience. We have that same problem. We share that, meaning we look at the experience to determine whether or not they're competent to run a security company and carry a firearm and protect your children. And the other issue is provide the resources that they're going to need. There's no doubt they need more physical bodies. I think there's no government entity that would not argue that. So we have to put that into the equation. One of the things that might help us too is some more legislative changes to give us power for reciprocity and limited license agreements among other states to be able to come here and do business in Georgia easy. We have a representative, a senior vice president from Allied Universal here who will have some things to say. And I'm hoping he doesn't trash me too bad. But I will tell you that under the circumstances, we feel and are very empathetic to this administrative bureaucracy that you're in and how it gets trapped. We could go to 5-year renewals, for example. We don't have to renew every 2 years. Maybe we go to like our driver's licenses, where we're now getting 10 years and 5-year renewal periods where we can go a little bit stronger and keep some of the workload off of the staff that it provides that. But all of these changes are going to need legislative support. And we can't make rules and promulgate rules without legislative authority. And the Attorney General has told us many times when we've attempted to use our discretion or we've tried to, cut red tape, they've stopped us and said the statutory requirement doesn't let you do that. And we cannot violate our oath of office to get somebody on track faster. I'll open for questions. Yes, sir. Can you give me my water? Yes, sir.
Any questions? Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much. Just a couple questions briefly. Who sets the rule for the timeline on processing applications for your particular license? Is that your board or is that by statute? Where does that come from?
I would have to, I'm going to speak a little bit out of turn. I believe it's going to be 60 or 90 days, and I believe it's set by statute.
Okay, so you're set by statute. And the last question I have is the senator from the 42nd would want me to ask this question. I know when you talk about competent experience, does that include moral turpitude?
Yes, sir, it does. A lot of moral turpitude, which is extremely subjective to make a determination on whether someone who has committed a sexual assault and got arrested but did not get convicted should be protecting a school with a firearm. And these board members have to look at those particular applications to determine whether or not a child molester that took first offender should be carrying a firearm at a school as they protect it. And the staff member can't do that, so we have to get engaged.
And so, final question, Mr. Chairman, we don't have a list of offenses that you just shouldn't qualify for. You have to make that determination by using moral turpitude. Is that what I'm understanding?
Moral turpitude, I believe, is defined by some case laws that we have been advised by the Attorney General to say these would be identified as those moral turpitude areas in which we have the authority to deny. Now, I can't quote them off the top of my head, but I can next week since you got me.
You good?
So I've asked this of all the people. Do you have a test that is administered by the testing agency that once they qualify through you, then they have to
We're a unique board that we create our own tests, sir. By board, we hire subject matter experts externally. They put the board together utilizing the training division of the Secretary of State's office for guidance. Bringing that forward packed up with the nursing board, we are structured with subject matter experts. The Secretary of State hires subject matter experts to come in that are licensed and are qualified, that meet the standard. They create the state exam. It was recently updated about 5 or 6 years ago. And then we use the third-party Prometrics agency to proffer that exam.
So if I don't pass, do I find out what I missed?
I do not think so, sir. And I think the logic behind... It's categorized into different areas, and I think that that's really a question for the testing unit of the Secretary of State's office to find out why you don't get what you missed. I don't know that a board member that me, just coming out of the blue, is objecting to trying to get somebody to pass the exam. But I will tell you that prior to our intervention a few years ago, the exam was not really up to speed. It wasn't covering best practices, and we've tried to update that.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, Mark.
Curious, how many people on your board?
We have 7.
7. And you've been serving for 20 years?
Yes, sir.
That's a long time. Is there a turnover on that board, or?
Usually the only turnover is individuals that have just kind of gotten burned out or need to move on or retired, or their full-time job has become such an issue. I'm very blessed to be able to work within an environment that evaluates my ability to balance that. But many of them are entrepreneurs like these two here and do sacrifice their time. But those other individuals, it's a sacrifice of their time, so they may have to come off. But the biggest turnover we have has been we've had 3 directors of the GBI, of course, so they come in, or a situation where the governor might appoint someone else and move someone or do some shifting. But it's not as common for our board to do that turnover. Could we use some more board members to have a quorum? Yes, sir, we could. We could change the statute to make it from 7 to 10 to ensure that we always have a quorum to keep moving. That would be beneficial for us.
How often do you not have a quorum?
It's very rare, but maybe once a year we may not have a quorum, and if we do, what we do is create what they call a working group, and that working group does as much as we can from statutory ability. We just won't be able to vote, and therefore what we generally try to do, in general, is we'll try to call a teleconference a couple of days later so we can actually schedule a vote. And the only time we usually don't have a quorum is because somebody's full-time obligations kick in, or somebody's out sick, or we just haven't been able to do it. I believe we're very blessed with a dedicated board.
Appreciate you being here.
Anybody else? Thank y'all very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you.
Appreciate what you do. Next up is the Board of Massage Therapy. Okay.
We don't see security.
Okay.
We got the sign-up list for afterwards.
It's for afterwards.
Yeah, did you?
So are you with Massage Therapy?
No, sir, I'm not. I'm with Allied Universal
Can you tell me your name?
Richard Evans.
Do we have you on? Here, we're going to take the folks who weren't on the agenda. Okay, we're going to take all the sign-up sheets afterwards.
Okay.
At the end, we're going to go back through that.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Thank
public
you.
participation. Thank you so much, though.
Is anybody with the Board of Massage Therapy here? Okay. I guess they're busy giving massages. The Board of Cosmetology and Barbers. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Can y'all hear me okay? I have a loud voice, so I'm trying not to blow you out of the room. Thank you. Sometimes I get too close to that mic and y'all make me pull back. Thank y'all for having me today and asking me to be here and speak to the chairmen and to the board committee members. My name is Kay Kendrick, and I chair the Cosmetology and Barber Board. I've been very fortunate to be appointed by 3 governors, and I've served for since 2004. And I'm not really sure if it's because I'm stupid enough to keep coming back or if it's because they think I've done a good job, but either way, I have been here. I'm not the longest sitting board member. Our barber board member, who is my vice chair, has been there longer than I have. And we have very strong passion for what we do and for our career and for the consumers in our state. So I want to tell you a little bit about my background. I've been a cosmetologist for 46 years. I have a degree in cosmetology, I have a degree in applied sciences, and I have a degree in business management. I run a salon in my hometown, and I employ 3 people, including myself, and we run a very functional facility. But as a board member, I've not always been the chair. I started the chairship in 2011, and have been very proud to lead my group of people, and I have spoken before many of you. Mr. Walker and I have a relationship, sometimes not always good, sometimes I hope to rectify that, but I have a lot to talk to you about today, and I'm going to try to do it quickly because I can get on a roll. Our board consists of 9 members. We have cosmetologists, we have barbers, we have estheticians, we have nail technicians, and we have a barber instructor and a cosmetology instructor, and we have a consumer board member. And we always have a quorum. Very seldom do we not have a quorum, and we meet once a month for our regular board meetings, and then we meet every other month for citation hearings, and these are hearings, tribunal type hearings for people who need disciplinary action. Some months we can combine the two. We normally finish our board meeting about 1 o'clock, and then we all go home, and if we have to combine them, we're usually there till about 5 o'clock, somewhere right in there. But most of the time we can get out fairly quickly. We also have the ability, through COVID, I think is when we actually established the ability to have a committee. And in the committee, if we don't have a quorum that's there, we can do the business, we can make the recommendations, and we can take care of business, and then at the next full board meeting, they can ratify our decisions. We do the same thing with applications. Our application processes are done by the staff, and then the board ratifies them at the next meeting. If there's an application that has a discrepancy, then they're brought before the board. And usually it's something that has a criminal issue, and we've investigated, they've marked, yes, they have a criminal record, we've investigated it, and then we determine if they are eligible for a license. And I can tell you, the only time we have denied a license was to a sexual predator. And in our industry, you can't guarantee that they're not going to be alone with a child in some of our little booths, some of our salon suites. So in order to protect the children in our cities and states, we do not allow a sexual predator to have a license. We're really proud about all of our licensees that come out of the correctional institutes, that we give them the ability to have education, and a lot of them come out and have jobs, and they're successful and they don't reoffend. So we're proud of that. We're also proud of our military issue. We allow military spouses to turn over an application, turn over a license in as little as 24 hours, sometimes 48, and we let them come into our state because we feel like, and I've thought this for a lot of years, we feel like it's unfair if you're a spouse of a military and you're being transferred to another state, that you have to jump through a bunch of hoops to get a license in another state, that you're not going to live there forever, that it's a temporary thing. So if they have an active license that has no sanctions against it in the state they come from, we give them a courtesy license to work in the state of Georgia. The other thing we changed when we did that was, used to be they could only work on a military base. And while we have a number of military bases in the state of Georgia, they don't cover everything, and they don't have enough facilities to employ these people. So we'll let them work in any facility in the state with that license, just like any other licensed professional. We have approximately 95,000 plus licensees that we govern. We govern cosmetology, barber, hair designers, barber too, estheticians, nails, and I think that's all, and apprentices. And we're very proud of our apprenticeship program. We hear a lot about barriers into the industry, and our apprenticeship program is fantastic because our apprentices can actually work, make money while they're actually getting their education. When their education is done, they go take their exams, and the majority of them pass their exam, and then they're licensed to operate in the state of Georgia. The reason we have well, let me get back to our staff. Okay, our staff, we have 12 staff members, and they are the people that are our board support. It's our executive director, the executive secretary, the application complaints officers, the officer that does the applications for schools and salons, and then we have also the legal department, and we have the application specialists. There are 6 of them that process our applications. We actually process our applications. We were processing them the maximum was 5 to 7 days. Now we're up to 35 to 40 days. We are catching up. We were behind several months on applications, but it is actually getting better. One of the reasons we were having a hard time processing our applications, even the new applications, is the way the system is set up now. It makes it a little more difficult. And even though our application specialists don't have to present those applications to us for every application approval, if there's a deficiency in it, we have to find out why they were deficient, and we give them a year that license is held open for a year. So after a year, then it drops off and they have to reapply. But we do everything we can to satisfy whatever their deficiency is so that we can get them licensed and get them to work quickly. We no longer do the reciprocity in the state of Georgia, and the reason for that is because if you're doing an endorsement, you can endorse a license for a license. So if someone comes from another state, and even though their hours of education might not meet ours, if they have passed an exam in that state and they have a license in good standing, we feel like their work experience should justify them coming to work in the state of Georgia, so we endorse that license. And that makes it easier for people to be more mobile to come into the state of Georgia. Some of the things that we address, our complaints officers address, are the disciplinary action. And disciplinary action generally is someone who has violated the state law, generally sanitation or unlicensed practice. We give a lot of citations for people who work in our facilities that are not licensed. And sometimes they tell us it's because they didn't know they had to have a license, which falls to the governing of the salon owner. They're responsible for everyone working in their facility. We see a lot of that in our nail shops especially. Some of that is lack of communication, some of it is cultural, and some of it is a language barrier. And so we have to go in and discipline those. We handle appeals if someone is denied a license or if someone has been has had their license suspended or revoked. They have an opportunity to appeal it, and then they can appeal it further to the court system if they're not happy with our decision. So we deal with those on a regular basis. We deal with legal issues. Legal issues being someone who has a criminal background, and we have to go in and if they have like probation or some sanctions by the court, we mirror that sanction. So if they're on probation for 3 years, their license is on probation for the 3 years. So if they re-violate, then we have to go in and readdress the issue. So we issue consent orders for that, sometimes with a fine and sometimes with just an order of what the conditions are for their license. Our licensing fees are very reasonable, and we're one of the lowest in the state. And unfortunately, that gives us the reputation of being the lowest hanging fruit on the tree. I'm not sure I understand that terminology. I've heard it for years. But I also know that there were a lot of us, over 95,000 of us. That doesn't seem to me to be a low number. We keep our licenses down fee to make it reasonable for our licensees to get their license and to work. We renew every 2 years. This year we were renewing 53,000 cosmetologists. 53,000 cosmetologists were supposed to have been renewed between January and the end of March. Normally by the time we get to the end of March, we have processed 78% of our licenses have renewed. And then they have a late renewal period that they can go another 30 days, and they can do it before they have a really big problem. Right now, today, we are only at 68% of renewal of those 53,000, and it's due to the barriers with the system in our computer. Some of the things that we found going into the new system, everything did not correlate and translate. For example, if I own 2 licenses, I was initially told I'd have to have 2 different email addresses to work with that. They have since fixed that, so that is better. But simple things like, I've been in this business since the mid-'70s, okay? And some of the things that I was required to have on my application and file they were not required, they are now, like a social security number, date of birth, those kind of things. So when the license transferred over to the new system, some of the things we were finding was they didn't have their social security number address, so it would kick the thing out. Or they didn't have the birth date, or so it would kick it out. Or they had changed their email address since the last renewal, and it would kick it out. And they couldn't understand what was going on. We couldn't understand. As a board chair, it's very frustrating to me because I'm trying to help these people to get their licenses renewed, and they have to go in and verify that license first. Then once it's verified, then they get an email with a link that they can go in and use the PIN number they were given to renew that license. Well, we still keep getting to the second, we've verified their license, but then you try to go in, and for whatever barrier is missing in there, they still have a pop-up that says, you don't have a current license. But I can go to the system and I can look at it, I can see they do have a current license. So I'm not sure, where it is, and then I have to go back to the staff because I don't have access to those files to find out what their deficiency is, go back to the staff, and they have to look it up, and then they have to send it back, and then we get it back to them, and they can renew. I have been able to help a lot of people renew, and I know a lot of you representatives have had issues with people calling you, and I've worked with a lot of your constituents, and I've been very open about putting my phone number out there for people to contact me if they had these problems, and I get emails and contacts every day, and we're still having some problems. I hope that we're going to get this solved. The other issue we're going to have is that in July, we started on the barbers renewal. There are 6,000, over 6,000 of them. The next we're going to start on the hair designers. There are 12,000 of them. Then the new year we will start in with salons, estheticians, and nail technicians. So it's going to be a constant cycle till we get this system fixed up, that we're going to be delayed in processing applications. And they are very frustrated. Some of the things that I will tell you as far as licenses issued, we generally issue 225 to 250. We process those applications in a week, an average of 1,000 to 1,100 a month, every month. We are now doing more because of this system. We approximately process 135 endorsements from other states and other countries. We have the staff of 6 that are trying to support those, and with the new system, they are overburdened to the point where they're not able to go and do other things. They're dealing with these renewals and these things, where before they could shift them to other departments to help do other things. Our time scale was a maximum of 7 to 10 days, and now, as I said, it's 35 to 40. I'm trying to make sure I've got all my notes here. The main thing I'd like to say is that we have always prided ourselves for being a board that was very customer service oriented. We've always tried to be very open to our licensees, that they can reach us and that we're accountable. And up before COVID, we were having a regular yearly gathering where they could all come and speak to the board, and they could ask the board questions about law changes and rule changes, and that gave us ability to correspond with them back and forth. We've not been able to do that since COVID. I'm hoping that we can restart that, because it was a good benefit to the licensees in our state to be able to work with us and coordinate with us. We renew our rules every year at the end of the legislation session, so that we can make changes for any laws that have changed during the past year. We, the board, review the rules. Once we have changed them and made our corrections, they go to the AG's office. The AG approves them or sends them back to us for work, and then they go to the governor's office for the approval process. But we are the ones that actually write the rules and do establish that. We govern the schools. We don't have the authority to go in and inspect the schools, but we govern their curriculum and we govern their student body. And I want to say one thing about our education. I know there's been a lot of controversy over the years about the number of hours associated with cosmetology. So I want to try to correct that for y'all, because that's a misconception. We do require 1,500 hours for cosmetology of credit work. What we do is hard to give it credit hours like you do in a college course that is predominantly theory. Most of ours is practical application, and an example would be if a student is working on a perm hair that day, they're allowed 3 hours to process that perm. It may only take them an hour and a half to do it, but they're credited the 3 hours because that's the way our curriculum is set up. The average cosmetologist, the minimum amount of months in school for a cosmetologist and a barber is 9 months. The average cosmetologist can get out in 12. And that's with not going to school. We give them 10 credit hours a day as far as for their processes. So they can get out sooner. I finished in 7 months. That was back in the mid-'70s, and I worked my butt off, but I finished in 7 months. So it can be done. The students that drag longer into the school system generally are writing federal grant money. So, I don't have to hurry. I'm getting paid to be here. And they're slower, and they take their time. It's not a matter of what we impose on them. It's a matter of what they're imposing on themselves. So our maximum number of months in school is 9. Nail technicians is like 6, or maybe 3. Estheticians, I think, is 6. Everything goes down below the 9 months. So we're not making these students stay in school for months and years on end. They choose that. The apprenticeship program, we give them a license for 4 years. That allows them to work and learn while they're in the schools, or while they're in the salons, they can make money, they can earn their living, they're building their clientele. By the time they go to sit for their exam, they're an established stylist. They're already there. Our exam is provided by PSI. We used to give it ourselves, but it is a national licensing exam that was produced by professionals in the industry. They had to be credentialed professionals to work on each phase of the exam. They give it in, I think, 4 locations in the state of Georgia, and the students have easy access to it. And, I'm sorry.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
On that? Okay. I don't know if I'm on. Can y'all hear me? Yeah. So it's a national exam. So I guess are you confident that the stuff that's on that national exam is being covered by your state requirement?
Yes, sir. The difference in it is, even though it's a national exam, the core curriculum of our industry is the same state by state. Some states require different things in an exam. For example, we require they use a hot tool in the exam to make sure they know what they're doing and how to do it properly. We have like 5 modalities we get to add as a state to the national exam.
Okay.
Okay. Our students do have the ability to question where their deficiency is. They're in categories, and before they go to sit for the exam, we have what they call a candidate bulletin, and each one of that bulletin is the points of the exam that they're going to take, and it tells them how many points they get for passing or failing that. They'll know which one of those sections they're deficient in. It may be hair cutting, it may be sanitation. They'll know what their deficiency is, and they can request from PSI, exactly what did I fail this in so that we can retake it. And we don't have a limit on how many times they can retake it. We encourage them they have to get it done within 4 years. If they don't, then they have to go back and go to school. But we do everything in our power to get them into the field, get them working as fast as we can. And I think one of the biggest problems I have with this whole situation lately is that we don't feel like we're able to give the customer service that we are accustomed to giving to our applicants and our students. And that bothers me. And I did even ask the question, how can I be allowed access into the full system to help process these applications? One time I was told it would be a $15,000 bond to do it, and then later I was told, well, actually you can't do it because you're governing these licenses, but yet I can sit at the table when they're coming in for a tribunal hearing and I can govern them. So I'm not sure where that concept's coming from, but yet we're discussing allowing students at a college to process them. I would much rather have people in the industry that understand the process to be doing it rather than someone who doesn't. It's just my opinion. Pretty much that is, us in a nutshell, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
I'm sure the man that has most of the hair up here would like to ask a question. Chairman Wiedauer.
I know very little about this subject. I'm sorry. I got nothing to say.
Okay.
Chairman,
we're working on that.
Chairman Walker.
We have a joint question, Chairman Walker and Senator Mallow. We wanted to understand the number of required hours, and I know you said that it would take an hour to complete a perm and you credit 3 hours. Why not bring the hours in line with the actual expectation of the work to be performed so that you're not awarding felonious hours? If you do it in 1 and you credit 3, that seems like it's a waste of 2 hours that we could cut and update the curriculum in hours.
Okay, it's not really a waste because they don't waste those hours. When you first start out doing a service, you're learning, and it's a skill you learn to get faster at. And the reason why and not to get too deep into the roots of what we do, when you're doing a permanent, you've got to analyze the person's hair, you've got to analyze their scalp, you cleanse them, then you put the rollers in, which depending on how many rollers they want or what kind of curl they want, how many it's going to take. And then you put the solution on, it processes an average of 20 minutes. You rinse that out 5, you process the second solution for an average of 5 minutes, you rinse that out, then you cut and you style the hair. So someone who is fast can process it in an hour and a half. Someone who is not, it's going to take them 3 hours. So as they build skills, we still accredit them on their books for 3 hours for that perm, but when they finish in an hour and a half, they can go to something else and get more credited hours for that. Does that make sense?
It does. And growing up in a beauty shop with my aunt, she would have one person in the chair, one person being shampooed and one person in the dryer. So how would that work in the rotation of a school that may also be in practice of doing the same exact thing?
We can, and that's why I'm saying, when I was in school, we rolled our mannequins, we rolled our perms on mannequins if we didn't have clients. I would go through the process of rolling the mannequin, set it aside for the 20 minutes. While that 20 minutes process time is done, I might do a haircut. So now I've acquired 3 hours for the perm and the hour and a half for a haircut, but I finished them both in less than 3 hours. So on my books, I'm accredited with more hours in a day than what the curriculum allows for, but you have to allow for those extra hours for someone who's slower. So that's why it's set that way, is to give them the opportunity. We don't want them to rush through processes when they're dealing with chemicals with clients. We want them to be proficient. We tell them to get their proficiency first and their time second. And so once you're in a salon, yes, I average 4 to 5 hair color processes in a day, in a 10-hour day, and do about 20 haircuts in between their processing. And I'm just extremely fast. But one of my staff, it takes her longer, and I might do 4 people to her 1. So it just depends on how fast you are and how proficient you are. I'm a time management person. She just kind of likes to slow post. So that's the difference. Now, as far as the issue with tuition, and we hear that a lot about the barriers for the tuition, the technical schools, you can go to technical school in the state of Georgia, most people for no fee. They've got grant money, they've got payroll money, they've got lottery money. The ones that are signing grants and all that, they're choosing to do that. And sometimes they'll ride out that for the 2 years, 3 years. Then they'll immediately roll to something else for another 2 or 3 years. So the feds are having a problem with the money, and I've tried to explain to them, you're allowing them to be professional students when you do that. You need to cut the strings at one point. So we're now having problems with the schools, or questions from the schools with our curriculum for their accreditation. The federal agencies are wanting more specific hours. They're wanting us to increase hours for some of our modalities because they don't want to fund them if they're under 600 hours. So we're having to deal with that. Any more questions?
Thank you. Thank you for being here with us today. Thank you for being with us today. It's been informative. I want to commend you on the military spouse, the way y'all handle that. That's awesome. Sounds like you've been ahead of the curve on that for us. So, as a senator that represents Robbins Air Force Base, that's real important to me.
Thank you.
And the licensure by endorsement for the out-of-state, since you've got a national curriculum and a national exam, that's great. Makes a lot of sense, and
Thank you.
Appreciate that. You kind of sort of already addressed the cost of the degree, and you've addressed to some extent the hours, and the 1,500 hours sounds, like a lot to a lot of people. And that's for the full cosmetology license.
Mm-hmm.
There's other kind of lesser licenses, a barber of one and a nail tech and all that don't require that extent of hours. Is that correct?
The master barber and the master cos have the most hours, and the reason for that is because they can provide all the services. As a master cosmetologist, I can do skin, I can do nails, I can do all forms of hair design. The barber can do the same thing. The only difference in a barber license and my license is they have a license to shave and I don't. And I have a license to do nails and aesthetics and they don't. There's only difference in our curriculum.
But a nail tech, what's the hours for a nail tech?
600 hours.
Okay.
Actually, it's 535, not quite 6.
All right. On the cosmetology school, do you get is it a degree? Is it a certification? Is it a diploma?
It depends on the school. The technical schools do diplomas, and that's one of the reasons why they have a problem with accrediting in the hours. Some of our private schools do give diplomas. All of them get a certificate of accomplishment regardless. That's why I said I have a degree from technical trade school.
Because in the testimony I heard was the average cost was $17,000 to complete the full cosmetology.
That is if you choose to go to a private school. Now, the technical schools, like I said, there's almost everybody can get money to go to technical school and just about go for free.
Okay. On the, I think I heard you say you could do your apprenticeship, all of these licenses
Yes, sir.
require an apprenticeship, correct?
And the apprenticeship is in place of school. You don't go to school and then apprentice. Once you get out of school and you get your license, you are done. You get to do whatever you want to do in your industry. An apprenticeship program is a substitute for someone who doesn't have the means to go to school, who needs to work, or someone who doesn't have the money to go to school. So we hire them, we teach them, and we pay them along the way, and they have 4 years to complete the number of hours required, but most of them complete it within the first year or the 2 years, and then they go on and get their license. That's just a substitute to the school.
And that's where you get into the 3 hours for a perm and...
Well, both the school and apprentices require the same number of hours.
So the salon owner has to certify that?
Yeah. Each licensed professional, if you've been licensed for 36 months and you have a license in good standing, you can apprentice someone under you. Before 2015, when we combined the barber board and the cosmetology board, the barbers were not allowed to have but one per shop. The barbers were treated less friendly than the cosmetology, and I'm not sure why. And that bothered me, so that's why I said, let's combine the two boards. We'll cut down on governing. We're doing the same thing. Combine the two boards and make them equal. So
Okay.
the barbers are equal to the cosmet.
So I got one more question. How much of, like an apprentice, what would their wage be versus a licensed cosmetologist? What's the percentage differential, or it probably varies, but...
It does. The majority of the people that I know that apprentice people pay them a minimum wage plus their tips. They keep their tips. As far as a cosmetologist, once they get out of school, if they've been to school and they didn't have the opportunity to build a clientele in school, they have to build that clientele once they get into the industry. Some of the chain salons will pay them a minimum wage plus commission. Most independent salon owners pay commission, or they're independent contractors under that salon. And so it's a matter of building their money and their finances. But either way, it works well.
Thank you very much. Very informative.
Thank you.
So how often does your board meet? Once a month?
We meet once a month, and then every other month we meet twice a month. The second meeting in the month is to have tribunal hearings for violations.
And you try to do how many, y'all try to approve how many licenses a month?
We were approving average of 1,000.
Okay.
We're now down because of the processing time, but I had a fantastic turnover time.
So if I submit my application right now to become a cosmetologist and I do everything I'm supposed to do, what's the time, how long will it take me to get that license?
If your application is clean, meaning you have all the documentation we've asked for, and you didn't mark that you have a criminal background, usually now that is turning over in 7 to 10 days. We used to do it in less. The deficiency letters that we send out, a lot of times these people ignore them. That's why it takes longer for us to get their process done. They ignore them, or they just don't respond, and it takes us longer to do it.
The nail technicians, is that a license that covers multiple people in a certain establishment, or does every person in there?
Every person has to have their individual license.
And do we have inspectors that go out and make sure that how many inspectors?
We have 12 inspectors. The only problem is our inspectors, we share them with other divisions like the funeral homes and used car lots and used car parts.
Okay. Anybody have any more questions?
I think the gentleman at the end had one.
So the folks in school don't get paid?
No. They have to pay to go to school. Now, some schools will allow them to accept a tip, and I can't say for all schools, but I know some do.
And so to be in school is probably, 8 hours a day?
Mm-hmm. Unless they go part-time, and that's usually 4.
Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Kendrick, I think you know about everything there is to know about cosmetology, so thank you very much.
Thank you. I've worked here for a long time, and I've had a great passion for it. Thank y'all for having me today. Thank you for listening to me and giving me an opportunity to explain. And at any time that any of you need to reach me, I'm pretty accessible. Mr. Walker can probably tell you how to reach me.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. Thank you.
All right, we're well aware we're under watching the clock. We're trying to be done by noon, but that may not be possible since we had to take a break. I think we need to hear now from, hold on. We got another board? Okay, funeral directors. All right. Do we have another sign-up sheet too? Okay. Last but not least.
Undertakers are always used to being last. There's several of them here
I
in the
won't
room.
say the joke, but everybody knows it.
My name's Tommy Davis. I currently serve as the chairman for the State Board of Funeral Service. The State Board consists of 6 licensed funeral directors and embalmers, 1 community representative, along with executive director and several staff members and a member of the AG's office. We meet once a month. We oversee 2,048 funeral directors, 1,977 embalmers, 720 establishments, 145 crematories, and 607 apprentices. Currently, we're just over 85% of those have been able to renew during this renewal cycle, which leaves us about 825 that are still working to get renewed. Like I said, the board meets down in Macon once a month. We look at applications, appointments, complaints, all of those things. A lot of that is handled by the staff. They go ahead and make the appointments or applications when they come in. The appointments sometimes have to come before us, but if the application is complete for a licensee, they can take that and process it right through, and there's not a delay there. The delay we've found here lately, where we were taking about 1 to 2 weeks to process things, we're now about 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks to get things processed. Some of that is because of the new system. Some of it is staff. We've got 1 analyst that works for the Funeral Service Board, so that's pretty tough for that person to process those things and get that done. We have a pretty strong board. We work well together. We work with the public and with the licensees very well. We take complaints seriously. We take applications and appointments seriously. We are meeting in person, and when we can, we get those that are going to be appointed to appear before us in person, so we can talk to them and make sure that they understand their role at a funeral home and how important that role is to the community. The difficulties that we see go back to our staffing. The staff is working pretty hard. We've got 600,000 licensees in the state of Georgia and a call center that has 58 employees. So sometimes it's difficult for them to get somebody on the phone or get back to them. I'm a firm believer in a 30-second phone call can solve all the problems of the world. And I would rather talk to somebody in person than be emailing someone. I do that in my own business. But that's where we stand as a funeral service board. We found out about this meeting a little bit late in the game, but so our presentation is not as lengthy as others, but we wanted to move along with things. Right now we've got 58 applicants still in pending, and 24 of those that have not been processed yet. So we're moving through things pretty good, but there is a delay from a 1 to 2 week turnaround to a 4 to 6 week turnaround, and that's caused a heck of a backlog on us.
I'm with you on the 30-second phone call.
I love them, don't you?
Chairman Prince.
Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you for showing up today and presenting. My question, though, becomes the licensing piece. You're licensing the funeral homes, the actual homes themselves, not individuals. Is that correct?
No, funeral homes, funeral directors, embalmers, and apprentices.
Okay, so
all have a license.
So everyone, I mean, not everyone, but I guess most of the folks in that funeral home, one funeral home, has to be licensed to a certain degree. Is that
Yes, sir. There's a funeral director in full and continuous charge that is at every funeral home. Funeral home owners don't have to be a licensed funeral director. But in order for them to be a licensed funeral home, they have to have a funeral director in full and continuous charge that's appointed by the board. We receive applications, we appoint that person to serve as the funeral director in full and continuous charge. The owner hires that person to run their business for them as a licensed individual.
And then that person, that director, can hire, for lack of better, and I just know, and you guys do this all the time, but I may have 2 funerals one day. So you go here, you go here. Both of those persons in charge of that funeral have to be licensed.
Each funeral home has to have a licensed funeral director in full and continuous charge, right? One funeral director in full and continuous charge can't serve multiple locations. They can only serve the one location.
I think I'm talking about more sites. If you have 2 funerals on one day.
Oh, 2 funerals
2
in
funerals
one day.
on one day.
Yes.
One's at 1 o'clock and the other's at 12 o'clock, so you can't be at both of them. The persons in charge of those processions, for lack of better words, both have to be licensed?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
The funeral director in full and continuous charge just oversees the daily operation of the business. He may have multiple funeral directors, licensed funeral directors that work for that establishment, and they can handle multiple services in a day. Yes, sir.
Chairman Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, where do we land on the embalmer requirement being there was some legislation or discussion about whether or not you needed to have the embalming license anymore, or if that was sort of obsolete.
Well, what was going on, Mr. Williams had introduced a bill, I believe, that was going to separate our license. Right now, you have to have one to be the other. You have to have an embalmer to be a funeral director. And what he was doing was looking at trying to separate those licenses. So if someone doesn't want to work in the prep room, doesn't want to be an embalmer, and just wants to be a funeral director, they were making a pathway for that to happen. If they wanted to be an embalmer and not a funeral director, they were making a pathway for that to happen. Some of the educational requirements came into question, but I think that was kind of ironed out toward the end of it. But that's what was coming across y'all's desk, actually, was the splitting of the license. Right now, you have to be one to be the other. But they were looking at separating those to allow for maybe a broader band of employees coming in the future, those that didn't want to work in a prep room but wanted to be a funeral director, or vice versa. But that did not pass, as far as I know, here recently.
And do you have I mean, that sounds reasonable to me, to have it split, but I think I supported that. But is there a general consensus in the industry for that, or?
Well, what I would like to see personally, as a board member and as the chairman of the board, and I've been in the funeral business 40 years, I would like to see the legislature and the board work together to make that fit. I'd like to see us be able to sit down, have an open conversation, and say, as the governing body of the licensees in the state of Georgia, we see that these are your hurdles. The legislators sit down and say, as the representatives of the entire public, this is what we would like to see. And I think we could probably cross those bridges together and make that happen in the future, or at least agree on how that process proceeds. But I think we need to have dialogue between the state board and the legislature to make sure that we're all on the same page. It doesn't do us much good if we're not.
Yes, sir. One last question. If you do cremations, is that a separate license, or is that part of being a funeral director?
All funeral homes offer cremation services. There are separate crematories, standalone crematories, that just offer cremation. But all funeral homes offer cremation. A lot of that's done through third-party crematories. As I said before, there's 720, I think, establishments and only 145 crematories. So as you can see, most funeral homes operate.
So my question, I guess, is the crematory a funeral director? Do they have a funeral director license?
The crematory, to be a funeral director in full and continuous charge, you need to be a funeral director. The establishment has to have that. The crematory needs to have a licensed funeral director there.
All right, thank
To
you.
operate it, you don't have to be. You can be a cremationist or get your certification and so forth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's the Senator Walker and Mallow Show. Is it not true that a cemetery operator, a cemetery salesperson can do just about everything a funeral home or funeral director can do, and they don't have the same license or licensing requirements? They can sell a casket, a vault, a grave, all of those things at the cemetery?
That's not doing what a funeral director does. Selling merchandise is outside of that. They can sell graves, they can sell vaults, they can sell markers and so forth. They're third-party casket stores that provide caskets to the public. So they can sell the merchandise, but they cannot operate as a licensed funeral director or funeral home. If they do, they're operating outside of the law. So yes, sir, the merchandise is one thing. The funeral director, the funeral home and the service it provides is totally outside of that. That's just one of the aspects that we do.
So that leads me to my second question. So for a funeral director that is in full and continuous charge, if someone went outside of the funeral home to purchase those goods, would that funeral director in full and continuous charge be responsible for any action that happened on the funeral with those products that were purchased outside of that funeral director?
No, sir. What we do at my funeral home, I can speak to directly, is if you purchase a vault from the cemetery, that vault belongs to the cemetery. Any manufacturer's warranties, any operation of that vault, any question of that vault belongs to the person that sold that to you. Third-party casket providers, you can buy a casket at Costco, have it shipped to the funeral home. What we do at our funeral home is have the family or a representative of the family receive it, make sure it's in good, undamaged condition, and then we take it into the funeral home, place the deceased in it, and use that casket for burial at the family's request. But we don't hold the item. The warranty of the item is held by the seller of that item, the manufacturer, not the seller, but the manufacturer of that item, not by the funeral home. So we allow it. It's perfectly legal to do so. We don't have any problem with that. And it happens not as often as you think it would, but it does happen from time to time. But as far as who stands behind that product, the merchandise itself would be either the manufacturer or the seller of that product, not necessarily the funeral home, unless they are the seller of it. And then the manufacturer still holds the warranty on it, not the funeral home.
So you would agree we could split that license?
I'm not going to say that. I'll stand by what I said before. I would like to see the State Board of Funeral Service and the legislators sit at the same table and come up with a way to do something about the license. But I think we need to sit down and have open communication and talk about it.
Is that all? Anybody else have any questions? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank y'all.
All right, we've got about 10 people that have signed up to speak, and if you will, be as brief as you can and try to make your statement. We've heard a lot of stuff and probably have heard it about your particular licensing board that you're interested in. So if you will, try to be as brief as you can. Before I go on, Chairman Rick Williams, do you have a question?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I just saw your button.
I had some questions. And I'd like to clarify some of the things Mr. Davis just testified to. Myself and Representative Patty Bentley went and met with the State Board of Funeral Service 6 years ago, before Mr. Davis's tenure, offering to talk to them about legislation and issues. They started requiring funeral homes to have equipment and put a third sink in the embalming room after those rules and laws had been in effect for about 40 years. All of a sudden they read them different. So we went and met with them because they were issuing citations to a funeral home if they had 11 bottles of embalming fluid, not 12. They were one bottle short. if they didn't have the third sink in the embalming room, they were issuing a citation to the funeral home. I am Representative Bentley, asked the state board for a meeting, and we went to Macon, to the state board, and went over the laws and the rules, and we were brushed aside, shown much disrespect. Representative McDonald, Lauren McDonald, sent a letter to the State Board of Funeral Service 2 sessions ago, asking that we do have a sit down and a meeting, that we do try to work together on legislation. What we heard was crickets. That's what we heard from them. Nothing. No response. Is that not correct? I've been licensed for 52 years. I paid my dues. I went through mortuary college. When we were starting in the early years of 1969, 1970, we might do 1 cremation a year. In Georgia, cremation in 2023 is 53%. It's growing. Every funeral home has to have an embalming room. They have to have 24 bottles of fluid. They have to have all of the 8 caskets. And this happened to Representative Bentley. They sold a casket. The inspector came the day before her replacement casket came, and she was fined $100. There's 2 sets of rules, and there's 2 sets of things that take place in this Georgia State Board of Funeral Service. Has any family member served on the board of the board members? Yes. It goes from granddaddy to daddy to son. Generational. Something's wrong. It's consumer advocate on the board. That consumer advocate has served for 16 years. Something's wrong. We need more consumers on these boards than funeral directors themselves. They're protecting the profession, not the public. I've seen funeral homes hold bodies hostage. I've seen them hold bodies for money, for payment. We passed a bill 2 sessions ago. The governor signed it to reinstate license that had been lapsed up to 10 years of a funeral director. The Georgia State Board of Funeral Service, you can read their minutes, was aware of that legislation. They talked about it. They knew what was happening. The governor signed that bill. It went into effect. The Attorney General said, wait a minute, we want to add 3 words to that bill to make sure it covers all the bases. Okay. We repassed Senate Bill 209 this last session. The governor signed it here in the Capitol. We had a ceremony. The State Board of Funeral Service knew this bill passed. In June, when this applicant made an application and trying to make an application, there was no way to do it. There was no way to make it happen. There was no way to get the application started. The board had not prepared to implement new law, new rule. So there again, we've got to get more cooperation. Yes, I'd like to sit down and talk to the board. I'd like to open the dialogue. I thank you for my 2 minutes.
Thank you, Senator. And I did hear the person that presented for them said that he did want to sit down. So I look forward to hearing the results of that meeting. Maggie Hasty, who is the Government Affairs person for the Secretary of State, has asked that she could have a few minutes because she says she can probably answer some questions. So, Maggie, the floor is yours. And I hate to say it, but as briefly as you can, but you may have quite a few questions to answer. So go ahead.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to give some quick clarity. Thank you for allowing us to be here today. I wanted to explain the difference between the two systems that we're on, because I think that was brought up early on. The old licensing system is called MLO, and it was a very manual process. So people would mail in paper applications, and then analysts would take that paperwork and hand type it into the licensing system called MLO. About 2/3 of our licensing boards are still using that system as we transition to Goals, which is that new system that you've been hearing a lot about with the cosmetology board. MLO is very manual. They'd have to type everything in, and then if there were any deficiencies, they would email them and say, you know, here are your deficiencies, and they would have to input those on MLO. Goals, on the other hand, is an entirely virtual process, so people can see where their deficiencies are in real time before they actually submit their application. So that's the big difference, and hopefully that will get us through a lot of these applications a lot quicker. That's the goal. The only problem with that is, as we've transitioned to this new system, with the renewals, it's been a difficult time getting people to transition to previously held licenses onto this Goals system. But we're working through that every day. We've made the process a lot quicker. So if people do have issues, they can get through very quickly. You might have heard people needing PINs. We're happy to help with that. If in any way, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Just some quick information that I'd like to give you. Call center, we have 52 call center employees. There's 2 tiers of call center employees. So there's kind of those basic, you know, we'll answer the phone, give you whatever information we have, and then we also have people who escalate their calls to. We also have people in the call center who are specifically trained on nursing licenses. This 60-day application period, that's something that we implemented years ago. It's actually something that all of the boards do. That is because we had a lot of people who would start an application, and then we would send them a deficiency letter, and they would never get back to us. And so we'd have to keep sending deficiency letters, and we'd have applications that were years old that we had to keep in contact with, even though they weren't doing anything. So that 60-day window was to get those applications closed. Certainly we'll look into ways that we could make that a little different if that's not working out, but that was the intent originally, was to close those applications that people were never actually going to finish. I also have a breakdown of all of the nursing board staff. We have 24 full-time staff and 2 temp staff. They include 2 compliance analysts, 3 disciplinary nurse consultant supervisors, 4 disciplinary analysts, 1 discipline analyst who is also in liaison with the AG's office, 1 executive director, 2 temps, 8 analysts, 1 analyst supervisor, and then 1 nursing education consultant and 1 part-time nursing education consultant. Those are kind of the quick ones that I have. Anything else, I'd be happy to email you over time, but if you have any questions.
Thanks. Well, Maggie, the one question I would have is I'd ask the office to consider for all boards, given what you've heard, the backlog of staff, also our federal crisis with Postal Service, if you wouldn't just decide overall to, at a minimum, double that for the time being. If we get through this, Goals works the way that you hope, then, but I would ask the Secretary's office to consider that. And I think most of our members would join me in at least that simple
Absolutely.
request.
And also I want to say that 60 days, it starts over. So if we send someone a deficiency letter and they get back to us in 10 days and then we say, oh, but we're also missing this, it's not that whole 60 day kicks us into another 60-day window. So it's not just you have to get your application done in 60 days. It's just you have to get back to us within 60
Right.
days.
The feedback, though, that we've also heard, if they don't get in 60 days and they reapply, and there's a new application fee, and I can see where if my temper was already warm about something, that would be an explosionary factor.
Yeah, certainly.
So
That's
thank you
something to
for
look into.
considering that. Does anybody else have any quick questions for Senator Walker / Mello?
Thank you. We also had just a follow-up question. I noticed in all of the testimony, why don't we just have someone, especially in the fields with high rejections, someone dedicated to handle rejections specifically, so that there's a dedicated person who works through rejections, that somebody can say, here's who I call and talk to, I've been rejected, instead of having to go through the gauntlet all over again to get 3 different people to get 5 different answers?
So the way that our division works is we've got 8 different teams. You've got 4 different healthcare teams and 3 different trades teams, and then one called Section 8, which is a very small team. But those teams cover multiple different licensing boards. So, nursing, obviously that's a very big one. So they have nursing and I think music therapy, which is a very small board. Whereas other boards, they're cross-trained on qualifying agents for electricians and residential general contractors, and they're all kind of grouped together in similar trades. And on that, you have people who are trained to be analysts, you have people who are trained to be disciplinary or anything like that. So they're people who are specially trained, but they're covering multiple different boards. And the idea is that we're streamlining people, because obviously some boards have renewal periods at different times, so we want to kind of cover our bases, and there are ebbs and flows with licensing. So that's why we've got those groups of people together. To kind of smooth over those processes, so they're able to move between different boards but still have that kind of specialization.
So nobody that just focuses on rejections?
I'm not sure. Each division does, or each team does their own thing, but it's possible that there are people who just handle rejections. But all of the analysts will get back to people whenever they have a deficiency on their application, and then after the boards reject. Because the staff isn't the ones who are rejecting, it's the boards who are rejecting. So after board meetings, staff reaches out and says, here's your rejection reason, and if you want to appeal this, you can apply to speak before the board at their next meeting.
Chairman Prince.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Maggie, thanks for coming and sharing with us again. I know last month we met down in Macon. One of the issues, and I think it was brought up earlier today, is getting people back in the office. Have we made any headways, or is that where we're going?
That's where we're heading. We have our new executive director, Todd, who just started a couple weeks ago. So he's kind of getting the team in order and how he wants to run things, but he's a customer service expert from Amazon, so he's going to get that team organized however he sees best.
Chairman Weedower.
You just mentioned that Todd just started. How long was that position vacant?
It was vacant for a long period of time. It was hard to find talented labor in Macon, or someone who was willing to make the move to Macon. No offense to the people from Macon. It's a great city, but it's just there's a lack of talent in the city because it's a small city. So Gabriel Sterling had been the interim director for a number of months, but we let go of those reins and have somebody else take over. But I'm not sure on the exact timeline on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bill.
All right, if Ruth Ann Miller would like to come on up and speak. So again, if all of y'all could tell us who you're with, where you're from, try to be as brief as you can. Thank you.
I feel really short up here. My name's Ruth Ann Miller. I'm with the Athens area HBA, but I actually live in Gainesville. Thank you, Representative Wiedauer, for inviting me today. I work with the building industry, so I get frequent complaints when someone goes to renew their license or apply for their builder's license. So the typical comments that I get, and it's typically when they're frustrated, is by the time they call me to ask a question. If they've called the Secretary of State's office, they either don't get someone on the phone in the call center, or if they say, hey, put my name in the queue, they never get the call back, or they're just disconnected somewhere along the way. I got my notes. One of my builders recently applied, or he was applying for his license, and he got the letter saying he had not filled something out correctly, but wasn't told what the issue was. So he didn't know where in the application process he misfilled something out. And then with the new goal system, so I know there's kinks with it, but a lot of people just couldn't figure out how to work it out. And I was getting calls several days before the deadline, which prompted my call to Representative Wiedauer on that. And then my last, the system kind of just went down in the middle of that time crunch when everyone waits to the last minute to renew. And they were like, well, I've got a deadline, but the system's not working. So that's typically the calls that I get pertaining to the builder side. And these calls come in spurts, not necessarily all at once. And I've been in my role for about 4 years. So I've had pretty much the same consistent calls over time. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any questions from the members? Thank you so much. Robin, I think it's Pington. And Dara Shaw will be next.
Thank you, committee members, for having me. I'm Robin Pinchton, family nurse practitioner. I represent UAPRN, which is United Advanced Practice Registered Nurses of Georgia. I'm speaking under the umbrella of GNLC, which is Georgia Nursing Leadership Coalition. All nursing organizations have come together as one voice to represent our issues. And I do have an answer to Chairman Walker's question about nursing revenue. The numbers that we have, so it's $65 for an LPN RN license. It's $75 for an APRN license. We have approximately 173,000, that brings, I'm sorry, $173 for RNs and LPNs, and $18,000 approximately for APRNs. So that annual fee just for licenses is $6.3 million. That does not include the other fees, including education, fines, and that type of thing that comes in. The other question that I can answer is regarding renewal. I renewed my license just in January. It was a very smooth process. The only issue we did have was with a credit card processing issue, but Tara Taylor and the executive director of the Board of Nursing took care of it very quickly. We do work very, very well with the Board of Nursing. The executive director is very, very helpful, and she does resolve our issues very quickly. Now, the two issues I would like to bring up as an APRN, as you know, our law passed this year to allow APRNs to have an actual license. Currently, we have an authorization to practice against our RN license. So we're going to have approximately 28,000 advanced practice nurses, which include CRNAs, clinical nurse specialists, nurse practitioners, and midwives, convert their authorization to an actual license. That's going to come in to play September of 2025. We allowed enough time for the new goal system to be worked out so that we can get our license pushed through. We do have concerns that there is lack of staffing at the Board of Nursing to handle this transition and the possible questions and confusion that can come with it. For example, if you're a nurse practitioner and you're a nurse practitioner with a certification as a family nurse practitioner and a midwife, you'll have to have 2 licenses. So we anticipate some confusion and glitches with that process. And we do want to make sure that they're staffed appropriately to handle all that stuff. The second issue we want to address is, as you all know, APRNs are having a huge crisis with our cloud of practice agreement with the Board of Medicine. The Board of Medicine authorizes those agreements. Right now, we're up to 18 months to 24 months to get these authorized. The issue we're having is that the Board of Medicine does not have a way to communicate with all APRNs. They don't have a database of us at the Board of Medicine. The Board of Nursing does. So the Board of Nursing is our conduit for communication to all APRNs for things such as our new laws that are coming out, our collateral practice agreement issues, and our licensing issues. So the Board of Nursing and the Executive Director is taking quite a bit of time to meet with us, and we're dealing with two different boards. So it's very confusing, it's very complicated. Most states that have collaborative practice agreements as APRNs, everything is held under one board. Typically, that board is the Board of Nursing.
Can I ask a question on that right now?
Yes,
while
sir.
you're there? So how long has the state of Georgia been doing this? Is it new, or is it something that's just all of a sudden broken in the system with the medical board?
So in regards to the collateral practice agreement, we first brought this up to the Board of Medicine and the governor's deputy COO, Mark Smith, 18 months ago approximately, last February, and we've been working with him ever since, and the Board of Medicine ever since. Things were kind of progressing along until we did a study a couple months ago which found that our small sample census, we have 350 outstanding collateral practice agreements, 18 to 24 months that we know of. So the Board of Nursing is going to conduct a survey out to all APRNs to see what that number really is. It actually may be in the thousands.
Okay, but that requirement has been in existence, right? You've always had to have an agreement with a physician to be able to practice, right? And that's not new.
So it is
the requirement is not new.
The collateral practice agreement is not new. There's two codes, though, that govern that. There's one code that allows for a collateral practice agreement to be on file with the individual NP and the practice if you do not need a DEA number. And those are mostly in hospital. For those of us that do need a DPA number, a DEA number, we practice under another code, and we have to have our collateral practice agreement authorized by the Board of Medicine. That's if you need a DEA number, your collaborative practice agreement is authorized by the Board of Medicine. If you do choose not to have a DEA number, that does not have anything to do with the Board of Medicine. They don't authorize it, they don't review it, anything like that.
So I guess it hasn't been a problem until fairly recently. So
Yes, sir.
something's changed somewhere, so
Correct.
hopefully it's getting addressed. Okay, that's why I was.
Correct.
Go ahead. I interrupted you, so I didn't know
That's
if you
okay.
were done or not. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So our concern is that the survey is going to go out through the Board of Nursing, right? It's been in review for over a month now. We're waiting on, of course, review and that type of thing. Hopefully it will be out by the end of this week. That communication also is going to include all the new rules revolving around our new laws. Our new laws include NPs and PAs to sign death certificates, to sign Schedule II opioid products. So that's our concern. The Board of Nursing, it's short-staffed already. Now they have to help with all of our stuff that we're trying to deal with now.
Any questions?
Quick question. Do you guys have a website where you can post that, a lot of that information so nurses can go right there and sort of pull it down?
It's very fragmented.
Okay.
We have a couple
Thank-
organizations, but it's not an official, the only official way we have is through the Board of Nursing. The Board of Medicine does keep quite a bit of information on their website as well, but we have to notify our APRNs where that information is.
Okay, and because I see that being, not just with the nursing, but just a couple of these boards, if they have websites, talking about these changes and things like that, as well as the Secretary of State's office, that may help alleviate some of the questions and guide some of the folks. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. B. Dara, Shaw, and if Holly or Hallie Beninosa could be ready. I know I didn't say that right. Thank you, Dara.
Thank you. I represent the American Physical Therapy Association of Georgia. I'd like to thank all of you and the General Assembly for focusing on the barriers facing professional licensure here in Georgia. as everyone else has been doing, we just want to go ahead and voice our ongoing concerns with our current workforce, our new graduates, and many out-of-state PTs and PTAs attempting to move to Georgia. We understand many of you have received many calls through the renewal process during session and are now hearing from a lot of our new graduates. As president of APTA Georgia, I'd like to provide some context for several remarks made during the inaugural meeting with the Secretary of State's office. As discussed during the Secretary of State's presentation, physical therapy is in healthcare too, in terms of the renewal process, and we are one of the largest of the smaller professional groups. In terms of active licenses, our profession typically has about 12,000 renewals from PTs and PTAs. Our association's primary issues through implementation of the new goal system is, of course, the system itself, but also the lack of communication from the Secretary of State's office to all my members and all of the other 12,000 plus licensees that I'm not even the president of. But I was handling the communication for all of the licensees of Georgia. Just to give you a little bit of a timeline, the renewal for PTs and PTAs went live in October 2023. Physical therapy was one of the first professions to be part of the rollout process of the new goal system. In mid-October, APTA Georgia began to receive multiple emails and calls from members having difficulty just accessing the new system, unable to verify their accounts, unable to even register to apply for a license. In addition, our membership reported significant bugs in the system: autofill functions populating incorrect information, paperwork that disappears from the system, renewal licenses receiving questions that were intended for new graduates, and lagging response times to correct the errors. Some reports of 2+ weeks to just get a response to verify or register an account with the system. Due to the continued errors and large number of pending applications, in late November, we received an extension to the renewal deadline until January 31st, which decreased pressure and helped many licensees. However, we continued to receive communication from licensees that they were unable to verify their accounts or continued pending status due to multiple glitches. Mind you, this is 1 month past the original deadline. Throughout this process, APTA Georgia continued to be the primary source of information for our members and the 12,000 other licensees, with many licensees continuing to email us regarding their inability to verify and access their account through goals. I felt obligated to communicate the issues I was managing for our members, along with the information I received from the state board, who I deeply appreciate for the prompt responses to the questions they could address. Our executive director, Stacy Price, and our chair, Ann Thompson, were amazing in terms of just providing as much information as they had that I could communicate. However, APTA Georgia was not the association and the avenue that should have been at the forefront of mass communication to these licensees. Our attempts to notify the Secretary of State's office of the issues and attempt to help resolve them have been heard, but with little follow-up. We have attempted to work together to ease the call volume to the board and their office, but we have reached a roadblock where the delays continue to go unseen. We received last-minute extensions until March 31st for renewals, but we knew we had a bigger problem approaching in May when hundreds of PT and PTA students would be applying for licensure. In April, APTA Georgia wrote a formal letter to the Secretary of State's office outlining the anticipated delays and being proactive to help license these new graduates. Unfortunately, as we expected, we immediately saw an issue in which a student could not even start the licensing process until they graduated, and that was not the case for the old system. You could go in and at least start your application so that when you passed the exam, all you had to do was send in your exam, and then you had your license within a few weeks. Did you have a question?
You're giving a lot of detail. Can you submit this in writing so that I can read it? I can't remember all of that, and maybe my other colleagues can, but I'm going to lose that as soon as I hit I-16.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I actually have a lengthier letter than even this testimony that I can send out to you.
I appreciate the where it's been and where you've gone, and I understand why you're doing it. Can you tell us where you are right now?
Yes.
Okay.
So right now we are where new graduates are continuing to have issues with fingerprinting. And so we have been told that it was a vendor issue, but it's taking a very long time for them to even get the paperwork to be able to do the fingerprinting. And we've reached out to try to resolve the issue, and we started doing that in June. And we have not heard back yet on what we can do to resolve the issue.
So you're reaching out to your executive director, and you have not received what your instructions are to all your members yet?
They cannot do it's a vendor issue, so they also cannot do anything about it. We reached out to the Secretary of State's office. We also, just to keep it brief from here on, we also have many suggestions that we think could help the licensure process. Also taking away secondary licensure for PTs, which is an extra step during licensure for us. Many of us have a dry needling license, but many of us do not. And it could be an attestation versus like continuing to submit the paperwork every 2 years. That is unnecessary because we don't have to do the coursework again every 2 years. So there are a lot of other suggestions that I can send the entire testimony to you guys for that information, and would just, continue to invite the collaboration to make sure that that continues to get better.
Thank you. We look forward to that, and it is highly possible that we invite you back. And
Yeah,
thank you for being here today. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir, and I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. What was it, Hallie? Is there Hattie or Hallie or Holly?
Holly.
Is that you? Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Holly Benencosa, left-handed, so a little difficult on there. I am the executive director with the QABA Credentialing Board, also known as the Qualified Applied Behavior Analysis Credentialing Board. I have been with QABA since 2018 and have had the opportunity of working in the field of behavior analysis, bringing success to children with autism and their families by using the evidence-based science of applied behavior analysis, or ABA. I am speaking today on behalf of Malia Davis, who is a behavior analyst, an ABA business owner, and a parent of a child with autism. She could not be here today due to a family emergency, so I'm stepping in. However, it's important that I share her story today and bring to your attention an issue that will likely start to negatively impact my credentialing board certificates in the state and inhibit their inability to continue to work in the state of Georgia. ABA therapy forever changed Jake, who is Malia's son. It inspired her to return to school and become credentialed through the BACB and QABA to be a behavior analyst so she could work with her son and other children facing the same challenges as Jake. It also inspired her to open Almeida Behavioral Therapy in Richmond Hills, Georgia, where she employs behavior analysts, assistant behavior analysts, and behavior technicians. Her practice employs both BACB and QABA credentialed behavior analysts and currently serves many children and families touched by autism spectrum-related disorders. As the executive director of QABA, I work with ABA providers across the country, and Georgia should be proud to have such an incredible practice working with their children. While all ABA providers are essential and do great work, Malia's practice in particular is special. Her practice serves the state's greatest number of military members' families because of their close proximity to Fort Stewart. I am proud that QABA is a strong military partner. Almost every one of our board members is a military spouse or has military ties. QABA is proudly included in the TRICARE Manual, which is the U.S. military's primary insurance, to provide ABA therapy to service members' families. Fort Stewart is an approved Exceptional Family Members Program base. which means the base has more resources for behavioral therapy for family members who need extra care. Army service members put in requests from all across the country to be transferred to Fort Stewart so their children can go to Malia's practice. Georgia should be proud that Fort Stewart, Fort Eisenhower, Fort Moore, Kings Bay Naval Base, and Warner Robins Air Force Base are all bases approved in the TRICARE manual as EFMP bases. Licensure for the behavior analyst is currently being established in Georgia through the Secretary of State's office. As the executive director of one out of two major credentialing agencies for behavior analysts, which has almost 100 certificates practicing and servicing families in the state, I am very invested in cooperating with the licensing board to ensure there is no disruption in care and that QABA behavior analysts can continue to work. However, the current actions of the new behavior analysts licensing boards are raising significant concerns among our behavior analysts. To provide context, the United States has two primary behavior analyst certifying entities, the Behavior Analyst Certification Board, also known as the BACB, and us, QABA. Many practices employ BCBAs and QBAs because our credentialing boards require extremely similar and highly rigorous requirements. The biggest difference is that QABA is accredited by the Golden Standard American National Standards Institute, or ANSI. The BACB is accredited by the National Commission for Certifying Agencies. The Georgia Behavior Analyst Licensing Board currently includes only BACB credentialed practitioners. The board is supposed to issue licenses for both BCBAs and QBAs. The board recently adopted only BCBA-specific codes as some of the board's rules. The board also had to write into its rules, per the law, that they will accept ANSI-accredited organizations to be eligible for licenses. But when I showed up at multiple board meetings and pleaded for the board to directly list QABA in their rules to be eligible for licensure, I was left with complete silence. I was told I would receive a written correspondence from the board about whether my QABA credentialed practitioners will be issued licenses when they begin that process. I've been waiting a month and a half with no response. At the licensing board's May meeting, I coordinated over 15 parents and practitioners to testify and voice their concerns about licensure impacting already limited ABA resources in the state, and how the lack of QABA representation on the board could lead to a biased response when issuing licenses. I had military families state they might have to transfer from Fort Stewart if the QBAs and QASPSs for their children that work with their children are not issued licenses because of how long the wait lists are for ABA care in Georgia. I had practitioners talk about how they're worried they might lose their jobs because they decided to be credentialed with QABA instead of BACB. Do you want to know what their response was after we testified for over an hour? Nothing. Complete silence. They went straight into the executive session and the meeting was essentially over. We have dealt with licensing politics in other states, for example, in Texas, where I had practitioners unable to work at Fort Hood because the licensing board would not issue them licenses over their subjective opinions on who should get licenses and not based upon the hours or merit. We cannot have this happen in Georgia. Licensure hasn't even begun yet, and I am incredibly concerned about QABA practitioners and their ability to continue working in the state. The intent of the law is to establish licensure for behavior analysts, is to protect the consumer and not potentially shut out a certifying entity out of the market. QABA credentials more than half of the state's behavior analyst technician workforce. If they are not issued licenses over board politics, wait times for Georgia families could double or even triple, and families may be forced to leave the state for better treatment elsewhere. We can't let this happen. This is an issue the Georgia General Assembly must be aware of. Thank you. And I
sat in on a committee meeting on this, and did the legislation pass?
It passed into, I believe it was,
Is it law?
Gabrielle if she could. Yeah, I'm going to ask Gabrielle to help.
Did it pass both bodies? Did it get signed into law? Okay.
We brought that bill late, about like 3 days before crossover, so we were unable to get the bill to cross and get out of rules. So the bill was adding 2 seats for QABA to have representation on the board, just because our concern is that
And that's
it's
why the
subjective.
concern is now, because it didn't pass and you don't have representation on the board, but you are certified. Okay.
What, I'm not trying to prolong the day, I apologize. What is the difference between whatever the other qualification is and what you are?
They're
Briefly.
very parallel.
Okay.
We're basically just a different entity that certifies the same kind of practitioners.
Okay.
So people have a choice.
Thank you for the brief answer, too. Any other questions? Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
You want to go that sheet? I feel the gentleman who was I don't know that your name's on it.
Richard
Yep,
Evans,
that's
yeah,
the
you're
next
here,
one.
Allied
Good deal,
Universal.
Allied Universal,
Okay.
gotcha.
And let me ask,
Trip
Pam Griggs
Mitchell.
and Trip Mitchell, y'all have already testified, haven't you? Yeah, okay.
Okay. And then the next one then will be, I think,
Yes.
they already went? Ruth Ann
No,
Miller?
she's already gone.
Okay.
Castleberry.
Castleberry will be next. Go ahead.
All right.
Richard.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and the members of the Joint Blue Ribbon Committee on Licensing Issues. My name is Richard Evans, and I'm here representing Allied Universal Security Services as the Senior Vice President based out here in Atlanta. And I want to thank you guys for the opportunity to speak before you today. I want to begin by expressing Allied Universal's deep respect and gratitude for the vital function that the Board of Private Detectives and Security Agency serves in ensuring the prerequisites to ensuring that candidates seeking licenses for detective and armed security guard positions to fully satisfy all the prerequisites to enter the security field. We also acknowledge the presence of other key industry and professions here today, which are equally significant to the prosperity and overall welfare of the state of Georgia. The main focus of my remarks today is to draw attention to the existing difficulties in the employee credentialing process and how they challenge the security industry to deliver crucial safety and security services to our clients. Allied Universal in the state of Georgia, we employ about 7,000 people. And of those 7,000 people, roughly 1,000 of those, 1,200 would be armed. During the course of any given time, we could have as many as 60 to 75 to 80 officers in backlog waiting for positions. Despite the initiatives taken by the Board of Detectives and Security Agencies, applicants are experiencing delays up to 16 weeks. So up to 16 weeks to get their licenses, and they're in that waiting period. Now, we realize that some of that is operator error, but when they have an error, then they're not notified, we're not notified. The period of 16 weeks or even the period of 10 weeks significantly surpasses the 20-day time frame posted on the state's website for getting people credentialed, and also it also surpasses the time for people to get credentialed for federal clearance license. I want to acknowledge the difficulties faced by the Georgia Secretary of State Professional Licensing Board and the Board of Private Detectives and Security Agencies. We're grateful for their willingness to work with the security community toward a solution. From the beginning of the year, we've been actively communicating with the board, and I spoke with Tripp today already and made a great connection, so we'll be working hand in hand to try to alleviate some of this. We urgently need pending new applications to be processed as quickly as possible and to prevent a backlog of the sort that it currently exists from ever building up again. We're concerned that we are nearing the critical tipping point that could jeopardize the safety of the Georgia businesses, their employees, and their facilities. We serve many critical infrastructure sites, such as manufacturing facilities, government agencies, federal aerospace and military sites, and other large employers throughout the state who simply cannot afford the risk that is presented by the lack of available security professionals in these states. Addressing the issue requires more than just allocating extra resources to improve the deployment of the current system or gradually clearing the existing backlog of requests. Instead, there must be a reassessment of the licensing procedures to ensure licenses and permits are issued promptly to applicants who fulfill all prerequisites. We are optimistic that the community today will continue to push the necessary dialogue about potential reforms. Nonetheless, as the dialogue proceeds, we encourage the board to collaborate with the industry professionals to identify certain temporary solutions until goals is remedied and able to support the efficient licensing of Georgia professional residents. As a corporate business partner, we would like to work with you to be a part of the solution and support other businesses operating in Georgia who seek security services. To that end, we suggest the following. Give priority applications that have a higher likelihood of resulting in actual employment rather than prioritizing them based on when they were submitted. By partnering with members of the industry, we can aim to minimize the time and resources spent on applicants who might no longer be interested or available for those positions. What we're seeing is individuals will apply, and then once they're applied, then some people wash out because their background comes back, or they find other employment, or they just simply can't wait 2 to 3 or 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 10 weeks or 16 weeks to get a job. As previously mentioned, Allied has observed that approximately 35% of individuals who apply ultimately fall out of the process. We'd like to have professional licensing board to authorize the various licensing boards not to deprioritize paper applications to those submitted through goals until the system is properly remedied. Both the board and the private detectives and security agencies and industry members are familiar with the process, which took less time to complete compared to the current timeline using goals. As a company and as individuals, we're fully committed to expand whatever efforts necessary to support and collaborate with the Joint Committee and the Security of State Professional Licensing Board and the Board of Private Detectives and Security Agencies in order to successfully resolve these challenges and promote the safety in Georgia. On behalf of our company and our valued employees, thank you for the courtesy and consideration today. We look forward to continuing to partner with you with these efforts.
Thank you, Richard, and I do appreciate somebody that brings possible solutions to the table, so hopefully they'll consider that.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Justin Castleberry.
Hey, thank y'all for seeing me
Your
today.
last but not least.
Last but not least, just got a brief statement. Thank y'all for seeing us today. I'm deeply saddened with the news that the Hearing Aid Board of Dealers and Dispensers Licensing is being considered for elimination by the Joint Blue Ribbon Committee on Licensing Issues. That would be short-sighted change of wide ranging impacts in my business with my colleagues and my families that I employ. It would also take away from a lot of people in rural areas getting help with their hearing aid needs going forth. What I would like to see is you guys reconsider that. And I'm, again, just going to keep it brief. We would love to see you reconsider that in the future. And I'm going to end with that, just keeping it really brief. And thank y'all for letting us be here today.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's the end of the folks who've signed up. Is there anyone else in the audience who has anything they wish to bring? I think we're going to connect you, if you'd like. I think we talked earlier. I know there are some of you here with issues. Is Maggie still here? She may have stepped out. Okay, had a noon meeting. If you want to bring those here, that's fine. We'll go over them with you. I know some members of boards, if you know the particular issue that you had with said board member, thank you board members for hanging around to hear those. We want to try to resolve those issues here today. I'm going to sit up here for as long as I can before I have to head back to South Georgia to do the same. And again, I appreciate you being here. Members, do y'all have anything else that you'd like to bring? We are dismissed, and you're welcome to come on back up this way.